I'm John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. For 100 years and counting, we've promoted an environment that creates success for local businesses and our community. Nearly 600 members strong, we are the voice of business in Elmhurst at all levels of government and a liaison to our residents, consumers, and tourists.
Since 1982.
1981.
1993.
1948.
Since 1955.
1892.
1991.
Since 1986.
1871.
We're here to help our customers' lives go right.
We put our customers and community first.
And innovation in relocation for 2 generations.
Serving our community more than just great meals.
We create innovation in glass and metals.
We permanently solve your IRS problems.
4 generations of family dedication, forever invested in you.
We keep families rolling safely down the road.
For generations, we've helped students reach their full potential.
4 generations of serving the best Bohemian cuisine.
Make that 5.
So make today the day that you become a valued addition to our award-winning chamber, whether as a new member or via reactivation. Contact our office by phone at 630-834-6060 or email info@elmhurstchamber.org to learn about what's in it for you. Be a part of our next 100 years.
You can't think about Elmhurst College without thinking about the community it's a part of.
When we introduce the college to prospective students, one of the biggest selling points is our location in a beautiful, safe, welcoming community just minutes from Chicago.
We also share resources and opportunities.
Our goal here in the simulation lab is to prepare nurses to be able to go out into the community. The collaboration of building this Sim Center together has really shown our commitment to the community and the healthcare of the people living in this community.
The college and the partnership have a number of relationships regarding athletic facilities, and they've been in place since the mid-1990s. I have the opportunity to speak to a number of park district directors from neighboring communities, and one of the things that I always tell them, if you have a college in your community, make sure you're a partner with them and reach out and be in touch with them, because there are so many overlapping opportunities.
The fresh perspective that Young Minds brings, not only to the college, but really to the community. That's something that you can just feel when you're walking around the town, and that's the effect that Elmhurst College has on the community of Elmhurst.
Opportunities connect local business owners to the college with invaluable insights on their business.
It ended up being one of the case studies where we talk through our marketing plan as a new business in Elmhurst and showcasing coffee and community and what that looks like. And that was our first point of really interacting with the college, and it was just a great experience because essentially we got this focus group of people to help us start to define who we are in this community. Our relationship with Elmhurst College has been invaluable to where we're at.
As a result, everybody wins, especially our students.
As an intern for the Chamber of Commerce, I do a lot of getting things prepared for events.
We get to work with the young students. We get to mentor them to some extent. It gives the students an opportunity to learn more about Elmhurst. It gives them a chance to work and to earn some money.
The same people that I'm emailing and talking to on a daily basis are the same people that I'm seeing at the Elmhurst Chamber events, are the same people that support Elmhurst, that are Blue Jay backers, and those people I see them sitting at our basketball games, so it kind of comes full circle for me.
We'll always benefit from one another and strive to succeed together.
When I think about the future of the city of Elmhurst, I believe that Elmhurst College plays a critical role. Not only does it continue to be an attraction for people to come visit Elmhurst, but I can't underscore enough how much that creative thinking that comes out of a liberal arts college means to the city of Elmhurst. We have a world-class town and a world-class college, and if we put our heads together, things can only get better.
It's an exciting time in Elmhurst, and I can't wait to see what happens next.
Thank you and welcome to our symposium this morning. I'd like to briefly start with a quick video.
Why do I go to Elmhurst College?
I'm close to everything.
I need a great school at a great price.
I'm learning about myself and my role in the world.
I love a challenge.
I'm dreaming big.
But feel totally at home. I want an education with meaning.
I want to be a champion for others. I made connections for life.
I'm ready for the real world. Why do I go to Elmhurst College?
To reach my full potential.
So again, good morning. My name is Marty Gabauer, and I'm the Executive Director for the Wiegand Center for Professional Excellence here at Elmhurst College. Thank you again for coming. I'll be your MC for today's program. Again, welcome to our symposium on engaging and employing our future leaders, or as we've dubbed it, ABCs of Gen Y, and Z. We're excited to have a number of experts lined up to talk with you about this important topic today. First off, though, what I'd like to do is thank our sponsors for today's program: the City of Elmhurst and Elmhurst College Commission, Community Bank of Elmhurst, Elmhurst College, Admiral Heating and Ventilating, the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Elmhurst Economic Development Commission, and John Nolden, EVP of Mortgage Lending at Guaranteed Rate. Before we start our program, there are a couple of housekeeping announcements that I'd like to make. First off, please make sure to turn off your cell phones or turn them down so they don't ring in the midst of the presentation. We'll have a couple of breaks throughout the morning, and so in case you need to use the facilities, they're located in the back towards the entrance. And we'll also be handing out index cards at the breaks. So if you have any questions for our panel discussion at 10:45, you can write down those questions, and if you can, drop them off in the back towards the fireplace, that would be great, or we'll also have people collecting them as well. So now I'd like to ask the president of Elmhurst College, Dr. Troy Van Aken, to come to the podium to make a few opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. I remember when I had the privilege of joining this community about 3 years ago, we started talking about this type of a conference at the City and College Commission meetings, and it's great to see that it's sort of coming to fruition. I think we originally this year planned to try to squeeze this in at the end of January when the polar vortex was going through. So I think we were wise to move that forward. I do want to hold up Rich Reichert and Desiree Chen. Rich is in the back. He was the former chair of the City College Commission. Desiree's been a longtime member of that, and of course she's on staff here at the college. And they really were passionate about this, wanting to see this be one of the manifestations of the City College Commission. We do a lot of things together. We do a lot of planning together. They're great advisors to me, to City Manager Jim Grabowski and the mayor. But you know, this is something that I think is a little bit more tangible and fits within our sweet spot as an educational institution. And we do deal with a fair number of Generation Y and Z people. So I hope this will be of utility to the community. I also do want to recognize, I see Sarah Diamonds here. Somebody told me Gail Robertson was in the, yeah, Gail's in the back. And Pete Griffin, the current chair of the City College Commission, I thank you for being here today and being a part of this. And I know Mayor Morley also plays a role in that, along with Jim Grabowski, and he's going to be here in just a little bit. How many of you had to look up, though, the years for Generation X and Y and Z? Even I had to. I mean, I deal with, you know, Generation Y and Z at home, and I deal with them, you know, here at the college. But just in case you didn't have time to do that, let me just make sure you know where you belong and where, you know, what we're talking about. So baby boomers, and this isn't, when you get to the front and end of these time periods, it gets a little blurry. We had a big debate in our office because we got somebody that was born in 1964 in the office. I was born in 1967, and that's at the tail end of some of this. But baby boomers, according to Google and Wikipedia, are from 1940 to 1960, give or take. Generation X is 1961 to 1979. Millennials are 1980 till 1994, and Generation Z, 1995 to 2010. So now you should know where you belong, where your kids belong, and grandkids or others. But we're going to be talking about the Millennials and Generation Z. And it's people that were born after 1980 today. And I think it's an interesting topic. And I know many of us here, we think of, Generation Ys as maybe work colleagues, a little bit younger work colleagues. Generation Zs as maybe a student or a real entry-level colleague. And they process things differently. Like I said, I was born in 1967, which means I just turned 51. And, cell phones were a big deal when I started the workforce. I was in IT at the time, so I was one of the first people to get a cell phone. That was a big deal. But these guys, they don't remember not having a cell phone since, they've been 12, 13 years old. So it's very, very different. We think about, some of these generations as our children, interns, maybe our babysitters. And some of these people haven't even entered the workforce. They're looking to enter the workforce right now. Both my children are Generation Zs, and I've learned a lot about, they really do process things a little differently, and they're great kids. But, there is something about this generation that I think it behooves us as businesses and society to try to take advantage of understanding how they think, what makes them tick, and how that we can all learn to work together as we grow and evolve. So thanks for being part of this. It really is a very prideful day. We've got a couple hundred people that had signed up for this event, and it promises to be something that I think we'll be talking about for weeks to come. Okay.
Thank you, Troy. Now we'd like to get right into the heart of our program. Our first speaker is Dr. Sonny Simpson. She's an associate professor of business administration at Elmhurst College. Dr. Simpson will help to lay the groundwork for our program by defining the generations in our workforce, expanding on a little bit of what Troy just talked about. Please join me in welcoming Sonny Simpson.
Hi there, can you hear me? Oh, I'm short. All right. Okay, so I hope I'm going to have some type that's a little bit small. I get that, and so I'm hopefully going to be able to explain to you what's on these slides. The first thing I want to ask you guys is, what defines a generation? Yes. Events. Good. Rest of you? The year you were born? Trends. All right, so we're getting to start to thinking about this. Well, when I started to do the research for this and get you some definitive answers, I found out that the Census Bureau's official policy is we do not measure different generations. The only generation that they've actually significantly put cutoff dates on were the boomers, and now they're thinking about doing the millennials. So when we're thinking about defining a generation, Merriam-Webster says to us that it's a group of individuals born and living contemporaneously. Oxford Dictionary says it a little bit more in English we can understand. All the people born and living at about the same time, regarded collectively. The average period has, by multi-generationalists, by the scholars that study cohorts of generations, says it's about 30 years, but as we're looking at the most recent generations, it's maybe about 15 years from one generation to the next. So we're going to think that it's a little bit of a moving target. And they've lived through the similar events that have created similar viewpoints or similar understandings of how to define the world. And are you able to see around me a little bit? Okay, good. So it's those experiences that bind people in a continuous years into a cohort. And so it does get blurry what those lines are. Why do we care? We care for marketing reasons. We want to make sure that we have a viable segment or a market segment that is large enough, that's homogeneous, that we can easily target. We want to make sure we can describe those consumers, and we want to understand their active interest, their activities, their interests and opinions, and so we look at demographic profiles quite a bit. And from management standpoint, as Troy was saying, communication, we want to understand them. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the environmental influences on each of the generations in the workforce, their management preferences, their motivators, their beliefs, and their personal characteristics. And I'm going to do this from the perspective of the academic literature, so from those studies that have been published. So it'll be a little bit encompassing. All right, so just were those generation breaks? And I'm glad that Troy gave you some of those numbers. We've had discussions in the group itself that all of our numbers start and stop at different places. Pew Research has a set of data. Atlantic, The Wire, there's a number of places of folks that have published dates that are very different. In fact, The Wire, which talks to Gen X and Gen Y, didn't even call themselves Gen Y. They called themselves Millennial. And Gen Z, they called TBD, to be determined. They didn't even give you a name. So what's important here to understand are these two intersections. And what those two intersections are saying, is that Gen Y, the millennials, are now a larger population about this year, if not next year, than the boomers. And then by 2028, I can't seem to get this to go and show you, but by 2028, the second circle, Gen Z will also be up there. One of the sets of data that we look at in the marketing world from a teaching perspective, seniors, we call them seniors or matures, they were born clear up to 1951, so the turn of the century, last century. We divided up older boomers from younger boomers, older boomers being immediately right after World War II, younger boomers going clear down to 1964. I think it depends on which or birth order, which family group you were born in, to whether you identify as a Gen Xer or a boomer or a Gen Xer or a Y. So if you're the oldest in your family and you were born in 1964, you might identify more as a Gen Xer. But if you're the youngest, you might identify more as a boomer. Does that make sense because of the family background? So I think Troy already asked you to think about which generation are you in, which generation are your colleagues, and which generation are certain loved ones that you are associating with. So as I go through these profiles, I'm just checking on my time, as I'm going through those profiles, I would like you to think about where you identify. What makes your generation unique? So the matures or the traditionals are also known as, or traditionalists are also known as the greatest generation, if they are the pre-World War II or in World War II, the Depression era, the Depression generation, the veteran generation, the silent generation, the moral authority generation, the radio babies generation, and the forgotten generation. So there's all kinds of labels that have been used. They were highly influenced by World War II, whether they were able to participate in World War II or not, had a difference. And they really valued homogeneity in the group, which is going to be very different by the time we get down to Gen Z. But they've really valued homogeneity, family, community institutions. And what's the technology you see in the top right-hand corner, if you can see that visual? Right, so the families gathered around the family radio in the living room, and that's where you got your news. Where else did you get your news? Newspaper, one other place. Well, word of mouth certainly, and it's still word of mouth works well today. I'm sorry? The diner. At the movie theater. At the movie theater. They had news clips at the movie theater, so propaganda reels at the movie theater. That's where you got your news on the war, right? Every Saturday night. We still have some matures in the workplace. Yay, for those of us in Gen X, nobody's leaving, so it's hard to move up, right? We gotta get the boomers out, and we've got some matures still working. So we've got RBG, we've got Warren Buffett, we got a lot of places, people working out there. It was truly the introduction, this generation had the true introduction to white collar. To white-collar jobs, and they really were white collars versus blue collars and other types of things. Wealth was measured by how much you had in your home and your savings. They dominate all the top positions if they're still working, and their management preferences are more hierarchical or authoritarian, and really letting employees know things on a need-to-know basis. Personal characteristics, they're really confident in their own abilities, and they feel that you need your own talent to fulfill your goals. You use your talent to fulfill your goals, but they will defer to authority. Those that those that are out there are showing the effects of aging, but man, they're still out there doing healthy things. They're relatively in good health. Their motivators are, if you are employing folks in this generation, are about retirement, and leisure is the reward for hard work. They respect, they want respect, they want employment security and financial rewards for a rainy day, and they really believe in the traditional family, patriotism, job for life, inherent goodness of moderation. And then we've got the boomers. Everybody's talked about the boomers. Again, many of the boomers, some are retiring, many are still out there in the workforce. They're the me generation and the moral authority, and they're not gathering around the radio, but they were gathering around the TV in there. And when we look at generations, we look at what was happening during the years where they were coming of age, because that defines the generation. What was happening in the years of coming of age? So the communication of when they were coming of age was television in the living room, Cold War influence. They are a generation that expects the best, and they embrace entitlement. They're a generation that witnessed the assassination of JFK, of RK, Robert Kennedy, and MLK. And I've decided if you have a last name ending in K, that was bad in that generation. They were about the Vietnam War or not about the Vietnam War. This was a generation that really brought on civil riots for standing up for themselves, standing up for equality, sexual revolution, civil rights. And they got to witness the foibles of political, religious, and business leaders. Anybody want to say Watergate? The boomers, or the me generation, or the moral authority, they were the first to have dual careers, expecting high income, and they were expecting high education levels. And in retirement, it's active, so it's not really retirement. It's sometimes semi-retirement. Their management preferences are all about, they do respect authority. However, they want to be viewed as equal. They say they want a consultative approach, but according to the literature, they generally lack skills and training in that because management training didn't exist early on in their development, and they resort to micromanagement. They like consensus, and they dislike authoritarianism, and yet they respect authority. So it's a really interesting, they were kind of in this middle place, transitioning from one view of the world to another. They require little feedback to perform, and they don't understand those that do require feedback. We get that, right? Okay. In terms of personal characteristics, they abhor laziness, and they have a viewpoint on what that means. They like face-to-face communication and would prefer to walk into someone else's office to have that conversation than, say, get it electronically. They tend to work long and hard to the point of being workaholics in order to be successful. This was, the folks that were in the civil rights were also seen in the literature as ruthless in climbing up the ladder and making our own rules. We started making our own rules in the 60s. We're going to continue to make up our own rules and not necessarily assume the rules that were provided from the previous generation are the ones we should follow. In terms of personal characteristics, this generation has really strong social skills, and they don't understand those that don't. They have less tech skills, they know that, and they're excellent networkers. They value the network of the community around them. They're very loyal employees. They're competitive, self-reliant, and individualistic. And lastly, they're motivators. I've got 2 slides here. Their motivators are to be on top and in charge. They like status symbols. They want to be recognized for their experience and wisdom. And by the way, it hurts me sometimes to give gross generalizations about any generation. I know that individuals are different, but this is what the literature is coming out and saying. They do like the chance to mentor young coworkers, which is awesome. And that ties back to the active retirement. They want an environment that challenges them and that they can contribute, but they want to know that they have an impact on the bottom line, that what they're doing matters. They believe in working hard gets you there. Success is seen with material possessions. They're driven. They truly believe the younger generation, which might be why we have people here, right? That the younger generation doesn't work as hard as they do because they see it as 8 to 6. And if you're not physically in the office talking to me in the office, then I don't see you as working. It's a different perspective than what the younger generations have. So they see working remotely and telecommuting and virtual office as unproductive in general. This particular group does. So you have to do your time before you can earn those initiatives. Which generation did the boomers parent? The millennials. They are the parents of our millennials. That's why we care. And this generation, Generation X, are the parents of what generation? Generation Z, right? Millennials are Generation Y. Millennials are Generation Y, and then Generation Z are the children of Generation X, who are also known as the doers, the post-boomers, the 13th generation, MTV generation, the lost generation, and the latchkey generation. And by the way, 13th means they're the 13th generation since the Declaration of the Independence. I didn't know that until I started doing this. All right, so these guys also reached adulthood during difficult times. There's a theme, every generation did. They are the first with dual career parents or single parent households, so they were the first to be latchkey children, and which meant they had a lot of unsupervised television time after school, because that television was in the living room. And so, yeah, they were watching Sesame Street, but they were also watching the Berlin Wall coming down and Tiananmen Square and all kinds of things. So they got to see things on TV others didn't. They faced in their coming of age years high unemployment, competition with the boomers, and corporate downsizing. So this is the first American generation to seriously confront reduced expectations. And again, they're their babies are Zs. So their environmental influences: uncertainty, individualism over collectivism, lack of solid traditions, and so they then turn to small groups of friends. And their television shows show that. More women are highly educated than males. They're more entrepreneurial, and they're not as devoted to large corporations, but they are high in tech use. They prefer immediate feedback because their computers give it to them, and so did the video games that they grew up with. And so that's different than with the boomers. They expect that in the workplace. They use teams to support everything from their individual efforts to their relationships, and they value skill development over fancy titles. And they don't like micromanagement. They prefer coaching, and they want plenty of recognition for their work. They're more skeptical. They're loyal to the profession and the career, not the organization. Loyal to the profession and the career, not the organization. They lack the social skills the boomers have, and they're more reluctant to network, and they like outcome over process. And they are willing to have multiple career tracks. They will have backup plans, and they value adaptability. So how are the millennials different? They're the most affluent generation that we have. They were raised in a time of expansion. They were raised in a digital world. They have $200 billion in annual buying power. $10 trillion will be spent in their lifetime here in the US. They're the largest generation in the workforce. They have strong influence. And by the way, they're not kids. They have their own kids. These guys, their oldest are in their 40s, early 40s. Norms are the internet, divorce, AIDS, terrorism, visible homelessness, drug abuse, gang violence. Significant respect for different types of family and cultural diversity. They watched corporate downfalls. They watched Gulf War, Columbine, kidnappings, and computer homework. It's the first generation with virtually full employment opportunities for women. Dual household income is standard. They really don't trust institutions, so they don't believe in job security, or they distrust job security. Yet they're optimistic, self-confident folks, and they were told by their parents, the boomers, that they can do anything, and they believe it. So they prefer minimal rules, minimal bureaucracy. They prefer openness and transparency, very different than the first generation we talked about. They like inclusivity in their management style. They like daily feedback, very different than the boomers. They like new challenges. They want their abilities to go to their stretch goals. They like flexibility in what projects they move to and where they work, and they want to work with people with similar values to themselves. Interactivity is two-way engagement. And as a result of seeing the things they witnessed on TV, they've become helicopter parents. They really are socially active. They value parenting more than anything, and they like the work-to-life balance, but they want immediate gratification. They're constantly questioning. So in a meeting, it's not how to get things done, it's why we're doing it. And I've got just a minute here, so I'm going to go on to the next group. So you want to give them meaningful assignments versus employment security, fast-track leadership programs, and they want relevant education that will help them with their careers. They like having to be respected for their ability, and work is one priority, but it's not the only priority. They like being mentored by boomers, by the way. And they believe diversity is a given and that meaning plus value in the workplace is important. They want to contribute to society more than earn dollars. Gen Z is dealing with global unrest, economic uncertainty, and global warming. They resent having to fix it. Terrorism, both globally, domestically, and in the cyberspace, is part of what they have to worry about, including active shooter training in their classrooms. They could be just as influential as the millennials. They often have two-parent households, unlike the millennials. Ethnic diversity is much higher, and there's a much higher percentage of this generation identifying as LGBTIQ. And they're choosing empowerment and choosing to voice their concerns. They're not going to put up with anything, whether you're authoritarian or not. So anyone can run for president in their world. They have the Parkland students, they have the Me Too generation, they have people standing up for bullying, so they're learning how to voice themselves. And they're exiting college with unique views. They're in the workforce now, so 25-year-olds are there as well. They've always had computers, they've always had the internet, they've always had mobile phones. They can speak in hashtags and they can speak in emojis. Emojis are now being used in court. Who knew? Who knew? They're extensively tech engaged, so they're constantly connected 24/7. They have a thing called nomophobia, meaning a phobia of being without mobile technology. Social media is absolutely their way of life, and so they desire immediacy and the impact of immediacy. And they do, believe it or not, trust brands, but they trust influencers, which they're being influenced by those folks speaking in social media on their phones, and they don't have cable TV. They're not dumb enough to spend the money on it. They're highly educated. They're really more skeptical. They're about recycling and sustainability, and they value personal responsibility, civic engagement, and diversity, and these guys are going to change the world. So I am done with my time, according to my timekeeper back there, so I'm going to leave you with the question, what are you going to do with this information? Thank you.
Thank you, Sani. As you can see, when Sani was talking through her information, and we started this presentation, actually, at the clicker, there you go. We talked about Gens Y and Z, but you notice there was also the impact of the other various generations. There's clearly a dynamic that is occurring right now in the workforce, and that is what our next speaker will be talking about. Our next speaker is Jen Ulrich. She's the System Director of Talent Acquisition and Development at Edward Elmhurst Health. Please join me in welcoming Jen.
Thank you, Marty. We're going to take this out of here so we can walk around a little bit. All right, we're going to talk about navigating the modern workforce here. I'm going to reiterate some of the things that Sani said. I'd like to get a little bit of an idea about who's in the audience. So do we have any Gen Zers here? 1, 2. All right, a few. How about millennials? Whoa. Okay, a lot of millennials. Could you all stand up for a minute? If you are a millennial, stay standing if you think you act like a millennial, or sit down if you don't. Yeah. All right. So this is kind of characteristic of what I see in the workplace. You can sit down now. When I ask people who are millennials in our orientation courses if they feel like millennials get a bad rap, they are angry about being labeled as a millennial, because millennials do get such a hard time from other generations about how they might be behaving. And I'll say this. Do you guys remember, if you're a boomer, do you remember teenagers and how, people called you teenagers in a derogatory fashion? Do you remember that? And how about if you were Gen X? Do you remember the slacker era? Do you remember that? And there was this whole thing about how slackers were terrible. So now it's the millennials, and the millennials are terrible, and they're this and that. I also caution, as Sani said, about sweeping generalizations about people, because everybody is different. Everybody is different. And I have to be careful about when we're interviewing people. I often tell our managers, please make sure that you are not stereotyping anybody. And one of the things that I want to tell you a story about is when I was on a jury for someone that was the person being tried was very clearly a felon in possession of a weapon, okay? So this felon had a gun. 8 people saw the guy. He had the gun. He dropped it. There were witnesses. I'm on the jury, we're deliberating. One of the jurors says, "He looks like my uncle. My uncle would never do that." And she was serious. So she wasn't going to go along with this whole thing, because her uncle, who looked like the guy, would never do something like that. It was very weird. So I also talked about the aggravated millennials, and then I'm going to talk about our panelists. So the panelists you're going to hear from later today are not characteristic necessarily of the generation they are in, or the characteristics you're going to hear about. So you're going to hear from them later. But they had some very interesting things to say, and they don't really fit in sometimes with the generation they represent. So at the core, this is it's differences, and it's managing differences in the workplace. So we can figure out a few things that we can do to manage these differences. I have managers who complain constantly about the millennials specifically. So let's talk about that first and foremost. You do have to respect those differences, and remember, at the heart of it, it is an issue of belonging. Every single person wants to belong. It's about community, it's about connecting, it's about being a part of something. So this is really where we have to go back to our core and remember, everybody wants to belong. When you're at work, you want to be a part of something. You want to be fulfilled in one way or another. So always go back to that people have a basic need, and remember that. Here's how our workforce looks. So we still have, some older folks who are working for us, and as Honey said, they're staying. They are not retiring. People are living longer, they're in better health, the financial situation is maybe not as good. They might have expected to be able to retire by now, but they're not. So they're still here, and they're in leadership roles. So those folks are still there, and they are kind of putting some compression down below for the jobs that people might be wanting to get promoted into. And then we've got this next segment, which is the 30 to 49-year-olds, and they're our largest segment. We have some folks who are very, very young. We've got a couple of people who are under 18, or not under 18, but right around 18, 19, very entry-level jobs, but not very many yet. So work priorities. For the millennials, the work-life balance is a top priority. We had somebody from our Linden Oaks Hospital, a manager, be very, very surprised when we interviewed somebody, they accepted the job, and then 2 weeks later, they told us that they were going to go on a sabbatical to Italy. So they quit because they got this other opportunity that came up. And this is what happens. People who get opportunities for more exciting things going on will take them. One of the things that we did in this case for this group was we said, you need to ask when you're interviewing somebody if there are other things that you're interested in doing. Are there other opportunities that you're interviewing for? What else are you considering? And it was one of the ways that we can figure out if somebody's truly committed to coming to work for us or not. Because if they're not, we're not going to hire them. We really invest a lot of time and energy into training somebody. I see a lot of heads shaking here. So it's perfectly okay to ask this question when you're interviewing somebody. What else are you looking at? What are your other considerations? A healthy personal life outside of work, also important for millennials. So you will find that people, if they aren't feeling well or they have some other thing going on, that's going to take precedence over work, potentially. And it is hard for some of us in the other generations to understand. I am a Generation X, so I think I kind of identify a little bit more with the boomers, as Sonny was explaining, but it's hard for some of us to imagine why somebody might not be as committed to the office or their job rather than their personal life. So this is something to remember, and remember that you have to work around this. There are ways to navigate around it. You have to look out for it. Millennials view work as a means to lead a sufficient life. Super different than some of us who really view work as a huge part of our life. It's most of our life. It's what identifies us, it's what defines us, and it is not the same for millennials. So, Z, a little bit different. Their work priorities are more about fairness, and they are bent on making equality, diversity, and inclusivity part of the corporate culture, which is phenomenal because really respecting and honoring the differences that we have in our cultures, they are terrific team members. Motivation. Millennials are dedicated employees. This might sound strange to you, some of you, but they are very dedicated employees and they want to do an amazing job. They also expect reward and opportunities for career growth. They're seeking support in their craft. They want to do a good job, they want to be developed, and they want to be trained. One of the things we have to remember as an older generation, again, is to make sure that they are getting constant feedback. They want to uplift someone's life through the work that they do. They want to find that meaning in life. And I think that's probably true for most of us as well. Now, Z is much more interested in money. They want money and they want to have a secure life outside of work. So it's almost totally different than what's going on with the millennials. Preferences. Millennials will believe that two heads are better than one and they are cooperative and team-oriented. Z see their colleagues as competition. So remember this when you're working with people. I was really surprised. I thought, because of all the inclusivity and all the things that they're considering in Z, that they wouldn't feel like this, but they are considering their colleagues as competition. So this is different. And they would rather rely on their abilities to get the job done. Now, both are thriving in the conditions of flexibility, and they want the flexibility. They want to be able to work from home. They want to be able to do things kind of in their own speed and time and space. So this is also something that as an organization, as a business, we have to figure out ways to make that happen and measure productivity rather than office time and face time. Changing roles. Okay, I mentioned this, I think, but the millennials are job hopping. If they find a better opportunity, they're going to job hop. The way that you can prevent this, if you want to retain your millennials, is to keep them occupied and challenged and developed. And it doesn't mean necessarily that they have to be promoted. It doesn't mean that there has to be another job, but it means that there has to be another challenge, and there has to be another learning opportunity. And we might hear more about that later from our panel. Be prepared to help them transfer their skills. This is a huge challenge for some of us who we want to have somebody in a job for quite a length of time. So we're hiring based on kind of a longer term mentality, but what we need to be thinking about is a shorter term. As an organization for Edward Elmhurst Health, what we're considering now are ways to develop people through the organization. So it might not even be in the exact same job, but it might be through different departments. So we are retaining them within our organization, but they're not doing the exact same thing forever. Now, Z feels more engaged when they're tapped for various roles or projects. So you can give them a wide variety of assignments, and they will be challenged and happy doing that. They also want to wear multiple hats. It makes them more versatile and more suitable for the next thing. Technology, both are technology savvy. Millennials saw the rise of the widespread use of the internet, but then Z, they knew nothing else. They are digital natives. Truly, they grew up with everything. They are so smooth with technology, they can make it work, and they know nothing else. Communication. So, I'm sorry, millennials, but you are seen as less personable because you have not mastered face-to-face communication. You prefer to be more on your device and communicate electronically. And Z, on the other hand, prefers face-to-face communication. I thought this was shocking that 74% of Gen Z would rather connect face-to-face. Now, to me, I thought that at first, I thought that meant in person. And what they mean by this is that even if it's FaceTime or Google Hangout or something else, it could be an electronic version of face-to-face. So it could be Skype, it could be something else. And I see this, I have 4 tweens myself, and, you know, verging on teens here. And they are definitely more on FaceTime than they are texting, which I find very interesting. I did not expect this. I kind of thought that we were headed for more electronic communication, so this came as a surprise to me. Education. Formal education really is still a prerequisite for professional work, but it could take a wide variety of paths. So it could be technical training, it could be on-the-job training, it could be any kind of education that's online, but it could be anything, but you still need to have some kind of technical or formal professional training. But it is our responsibility as an employer to be able to provide that for development. It's something that we have to do. It's an imperative. So if we, once we get past some of these older generations in the workplace, this will completely be the norm because the millennials and the Zs will do this as a matter of course, provide these opportunities. In the meantime, for those of us who are still Gen X and boomers, we have to start providing these opportunities for folks. All right, Sonny talked about this, so I'll skip that. I wanted to point everybody to this infographic that is online. It goes into different details. If after this conference you want to look this up, there are some more details about what it is between Y and Z. And if you just Google working Gen Y and Z, you will find that infographic. So if you need to take something back to your offices as a resource, just Google infographic Gen Y and Z in the workplace and you'll find that. All right, now attracting Y and Z. This is so hard for companies because most of us are not there yet. If you're not a startup or you're not kind of a tech company already, you do not probably have an instant, digital, or seamless way to attract and hire people. It's really something that we have to work on as a community, as a workforce. How many of you have applied for a job and had a terrible experience with trying to apply? Raise your hand. Maybe about half the room. Most application processes and interviewing processes are still very clunky. There are others that are getting better, but the expectation of being able to live your life online is just, it's one of the most important things that as an organization you have to be able to provide. It is that personal, seamless experience that you need to provide for people to be able to maneuver through their workday. Building out social media. So, one of our marketing folks is here today, and she knows this probably better than anybody in our organization, we have to build out all of the social media and our blogs and our application processes so that we can attract and retain people. Ensuring that you're mobile optimized. If you do not have a way to engage with your workforce that's on their phone, you are going to lose them. So make sure that you have ways to be mobily optimized. Your culture has to be trusted. This is something that, one of the reasons that I came to Edward Elmhurst Health in the first place, I wanted to work for a community organization. I wanted to work for trusted leadership. And I think that that's also true of Y and Z. We have to be able to trust that our leaders and our organizations are a good place to be. And this means culture, diversity, inclusion, flexibility, and balance. It also means inclusive benefits. So if you do not have inclusive benefits at this moment in time, work toward getting them, because you need to be able to cover a wide variety of sexual orientation, any kind of diverse or inclusive benefit that you can offer. Partnerships. Not as many people are getting married, but they might have partnerships or different kinds of family situations that need to be addressed through our benefit programs. All right, how many of you have been through or done behavioral interviewing? Okay, quite a few. Does somebody, you want to tell me? You have answers here up in front. Do you want to tell us what that means, a behavioral interview? Right, situation-based outcomes. We really, when we are asking questions of our candidates, we want to know what have they done. So it could be applied to the future. The best predictor of performance is what exactly have you done in the past. And I want to hear a story. I want to hear information, facts. I want to hear details. I want to know what you did. I want to know how it could be applied to the future state. We are hiring for really cultural fit first, and then we're hiring for the technical expertise. Because by the time somebody gets to us, we know that they've got the technical qualifications, but the cultural fit is so important. And there are questions that you can ask that will help you in determining whether or not the individual in front of you can really participate fully in your organization. So that question that I mentioned about, what else are you considering right now? What other opportunities do you have? Those are important questions to ask to see how dedicated and to see how well this person might fit into your organization. The fit has to be mutual, and I really want to stress this. Don't just apply to jobs. If you're a millennial, don't just apply to anything. Make sure that you're targeting your search. Make sure that you are really serious about taking that job and that you're not wasting anybody's time. If you get a reputation as somebody who's just not really interested, that's not a good thing. And it kind of puts a bad name on the rest of the millennials. So don't do it. And this is a special note for parents. How many parents here have millennial children? Okay. Millennials have struggled to find work for many different reasons. First of all, the jobs have not been plentiful. The degrees that have been offered have been expensive. So there are so many kids who are still at home living with their parents, and the parents have been of a generation where they cannot understand why that would still be occurring. So they have been trying to help their kids get jobs. And it is so important, parents out there, do not do the things for your kids to help them get the jobs. Encourage them and help them with suggestions, but the person who is applying for the job needs to be the one to make the application and to provide all the information, do the interviewing. I cannot tell you how many times I've had a parent contact me, and what I want to say to them is, have your kid contact me, okay? Have your kid contact me. And you can say, like, my dad knows you from so-and-so and whatever, but have your son or daughter do the work. Adulting. Who has used this term? Adulting. It's a new term, and I was really surprised the first time I heard it. But my office is very close to our front desk area. We have people who are coming in and they're doing their onboarding appointments with our HR assistant. And I have heard more than one person come in and say, could you help me with this? Because I'm new at adulting. And the first time I heard it, I thought, wow, okay, that can't really be happening. And then I heard it, more than once. So I thought, okay, I understand that this is a real thing, that it is hard for some people to do things because they have been helped, their entire life and their entire professional life even, they've been helped along with information and encouragement and step-by-step leading them down the path. So this is something as an organization we have to be very conscious about as well. Now, Sani mentioned something about people as managers, we cannot imagine that somebody would need more information or would need to have that much direction. This is just true. This is just something we have to get used to. There is a generation that needs more direction. They need more step-by-step direction from us. So you just have to get used to that and provide it. It's not something that we can really fight against. We have to provide more feedback, more direction, and more assistance in getting through steps and in working. And once they're there, they will be incredibly valuable employees. So it is worth it. They are wonderful employees. All right, leading and managing by listening. I wanted to just give you guys a quick, this is a little bit about coaching. Has anybody had any development or training here on what you would coach through listening? Coaching through listening? It's hard to do for some generations. So the micromanaging that comes from some generations, or the just do it kind of thing that comes from other generations. Now we really have to manage by listening and understanding what our folks are going through. Coming to a common consensus on how to maneuver in the workplace and accomplish things is really important. So what we use and what we've just started implementing about a year ago or so, we started training on something called the GROW method of coaching. It stands for Goal, Realities, Options, Way Forward. And what you do, I'm just going to give you a really quick synopsis of this. So take a few notes and then try it, practice it. The first thing you do is ask and say, what is the goal of your conversation? Could be anything. It could be small. It could be just a hallway conversation. And you can say, okay, what is it that I want to accomplish out of this dialogue that I'm having with you right now? So the next thing you want to do is share your point of view. This is the realities. And this is not telling somebody what to do. It is sharing information about what the realities of the current situation are. It is going to be so hard for some of you not to just tell somebody what to do, but talk about the realities of the situation. And then O is for options, asking open-ended questions to prompt solutions. So you can say, all right, what do you think should happen next? What do you think we should do? What is the next step? And just kind of open-ended questions to find out what should happen next. The last thing is the way forward. And let the person tell you what should happen next and what the plan is. Continue to ask questions until you have enough information about what the plan is. This means that you could say, okay, when could you deliver this to me? What needs to be the next step? And just write the things down, make the plan, but you're letting them tell you what the plan is. You're not mandating the plan, you're letting them create the plan. And this creates consensus for you in your planning. All right, there are a couple of things here on the end of my talk that I wanted to talk about. How much time do I have? If I have time, okay. Praise addiction. Has anybody heard of praise addiction? Praise addiction means, you have, Sani says yes, okay. Making career choices to impress others. probably many of us have done this in our life, where we're making a career choice because we want to impress someone else. And this isn't generational. This is, something that probably all of us have done at one time or another. You get this fleeting sense of validation, and then you lose sight of what really makes you happy. And then with each career move, you get unhappier. And then the more we try to impress, the more frustrated we feel. Keep in mind that anyone with deep career satisfaction really, they're doing something that makes them happy. They have a connection to it somehow. They are doing something that has meaning for them. So if you are in a position where you've pursued a career, maybe your whole life, that it was for the title or the career choice, but you're not doing what you love, think about getting into something that you love. We are at such low unemployment right now that it is a great opportunity for people to find something that they truly enjoy. And it does seem like people are not caring so much about money or position or wealth. There is a trend and a change toward people being able to do what they want. I'm looking at Jonathan in the front here, who is, he is a millennial. He was working for a large consulting company, and now he's going to buy a van, and he's going to drive around and do music and art and therapies for people. He's learning new things. You'll hear more from him later today, but he's leaving a lucrative consulting career to go pursue his passion. And there's more and more and more of that happening. So that will be an interesting thing to hear about later. All right, the next thing, the impact of social media and devices on people. Stress and burnout, all of the things that kind of came with the advent of cell phones. It wasn't as if people didn't have stress and burnout before. They did. Everybody was stressed, everybody was kind of burned out. These generations are feeling a whole new level of stress and burnout. People cannot accomplish the most mundane tasks. It is hard to get by in life. Who has a laundry list of tasks and, to-dos that there's no way you're ever going to get to? Raise your hand. I have a ridiculously long list of things that I will never get to. I should take them off the list. I need to reprioritize. There are all kinds of ways that we should be addressing this for ourselves in our personal lives and in our professional lives. Prioritizing the tasks and making sure that we have a manageable workload. People do not have manageable workloads anymore. It's not manageable. It's not realistic. I see Polly shaking her head. It's just something that is facing all of us. And managing that and trying to get to a better place is really important, and none of us are really able to do it. But depression, coming to work and feeling alone in a crowd, not connecting with our workforce, not feeling that sense of community. Back in the day, it really was, I'm looking at Pat now, who I worked with at the Tribune, we socialized a lot. We went out a lot together, and really it was like a family. It was another family. And we have that at the hospital too, where some departments are like family members. But for many companies, there is not that sense of belonging anymore. There's not that sense of community. You don't see that people are going out and hanging out together outside of work or even during work. There's no time. People don't go to lunch. It used to be that people would go out to lunch, they would engage with each other and have a very meaningful relationship with people that were at work. And it's not happening as much anymore. But there is this feeling, I think because of social media, that you're always less than, that you're always comparing yourself to other people, and that causes distance in between you and other people at work. So these concerns are impacting everybody. The impact that millennials have had on older generations is huge. A lot of older generations are not behaving the same at work anymore as they used to. We have a lot of older generations at work who are saying, I'm not doing this anymore. I am not going to, kill myself working extended hours and extra shifts and doing all this stuff because you've taken my life from me. You have really taken advantage of my professional loyalty. So we have older generations who are feeling that way now, and they're cutting back. Maybe they're working less. They can't handle the stress and burnout anymore, so they're cutting back. So those are some of the things that we're dealing with in the workforce. And I think recognizing it, trying to address it the best that we can, and finding very concrete ways to make change is what's going to help us move forward. Does anybody have any questions or any specific thing that they wanted to know about working in the workforce with Gen Y and Z? Any questions that you came with that you haven't heard anything about today so far? Yeah. He asked if we see a difference between hiring physicians and hiring employees, other employees, in terms of the generations. Not really. You know, the generational characteristics apply to almost everybody. And it's interesting to watch but it's good because we've got physicians who are coming in with the same characteristics as the new patient populations that they're serving as well. The GROW model. So what he said is the GROW model can take 5 minutes, whereas just telling somebody what to do takes 30 seconds. And that may be true in that 5 minutes to 30 seconds that you're using to have that initial communication, but the end result takes a whole heck of a lot longer because you might use 30 seconds on the front end, but you don't get the result that you want, so you spend hours backtracking and circling around. So that's where the trade-off is. It is still really hard for our managers. I don't see it in wide use yet. You know, it's something that we've trained, it's something that we encourage, but it is very, very hard to change, teach the old dog new tricks. What else? There's somebody in the back. Hold on.
Are you seeing any other attributes that you can, I don't know, connect to specific generations? For example, if you are looking at a Myers-Briggs, and would you say like Generation Y is more likely to be feeling, or is there anything else that you've come across? These all the descriptions today seem to totally make sense, but I don't know if there's something else too.
I would look to my academic friends to tell me if they know anything about that. Does anybody else know? You would make some assumptions, I think, that people might be more feeling, but I don't know. I have not seen any research. Go ahead.
There is a little research that says that Gen Z is a little more needy from an emotional standpoint than Gen Y and the previous generations. Like the older the generation, the more stoic. The younger the generation, the more emotionally, the more comfort there is in wearing the emotion on the sleeve. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. Yeah, I heard a lot about the changing relation between the later generations in terms of them being less, I guess, materialistic. And I guess this makes me wonder, do you sense any kind of change of power dynamics between employer and employee? In the sense that, I mean, we tend to think that we need employers, but do you see any kind of trend that actually says, well, maybe employers actually need employees? And if so, how is that resolving itself? Thank you.
It's terrible. Yes, that is exactly what's happening. As an employer, we really need employees, and we really need employees who care and who are passionate about serving others and being helpers. creating a safe, seamless, and personal healthcare experience. So the people we're looking for are few and far between. So yes, the power dynamic has totally shifted. You know, we're really searching to find those people, and it's much harder to find those people. So yeah, we're on the other side of the power dynamic these days.
You mentioned social media and devices, the impact that it has on all generations, but now I think we're going to be getting the reverse piece to it. Now that we get older generations using devices, and some of the symptoms you described for millennials and younger, we're starting to see those in older generations as they're addicted to their devices. Is there been any information out there on that?
Tons of information on that. Has everybody seen the Simon Sinek video on millennials and social media use? Have you seen that? If you haven't, I encourage everybody to watch it. Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K. He does quite a bit of information about millennials and about social media. So just Google Simon Sinek millennials or Simon Sinek social media. The terrible thing is that everybody is always on their device, and we're encouraging people to not be on their device in the workplace because you are making connections in the in-between. So when you have an opportunity to actually engage with somebody, but you're on your phone instead, or you're looking down, that's a missed opportunity to connect and engage. You don't have that sense of community anymore because people aren't talking to each other when they are in the hallway or before a meeting starts. So I do encourage everybody to be aware of those instances where you have an opportunity to look at somebody, to connect, and to do that instead of looking down at your phone and checking whatever it is. I mean, whatever it is not urgent, likely. People will say like, oh, I need to hear from my kids or, you know, whatever. We didn't used to have that. That didn't used to happen. Kids were fine. You know, people were okay without your instant response to what was going on in the moment. So be aware of that, and definitely it's impacting everybody, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the strategies that you've utilized to influence your leadership to kind of make these institutional changes within your organization regarding new benefits packages, maybe flexible work hours, flexible workspaces, all those kind of, what metrics are you using to?
It's very challenging because some of our leadership is still in a different mindset, but many are not. And we have a pretty forward-thinking group of leaders. Most of them, including our CEOs, totally get it. You know, they get it. And they are very, very supportive of making the changes.
So we're kind of experiencing that as well, and actually our barrier is actually coming in the middle. So it's the managers of the millennials and the Generation Z, and our leadership is kind of getting that buy-in, but then we're meeting in the middle and having information that's not passed on or strategies that are not passed on.
Yeah.
Are you experiencing that as well?
Yes, super common also, kind of a lack of cascading information and lack of buy-in at what might be needing to happen. Totally true. We're using kind of individual coaching. We're having individual conversations. It's hard to sway somebody and help them understand what might need to happen unless you are getting to their heart and soul and explaining to them what it means for them individually. So if they're not going to buy in, here's what's going to happen. We're not going to have the workforce that we need moving forward. I mean, bottom line, if we don't do these things, we will not have the workforce that we need. And we've got the leadership support at the top to also push that messaging down.
We have a question over here. Just out of curiosity, are you seeing in the younger Zs a kickback against some of the technology?
Yeah. Yes. So what I mentioned, even in my own kids, you know, I see a little bit about it. Something that I read online was that Z saw the negative impacts to the millennial generation. They saw that, and they've heard about it, and they are behaving differently. So we are seeing a difference in Generation Z.
Seamless online technologies to attract Gen Y, and then Z kicks back against it.
Yeah.
Is-
Z still expects, they still expect a seamless and electronic experience when they're applying to something or when they're getting customer service. They still expect a good online experience, so, and a mobile experience too. So that hasn't changed.
Okay, so we now have these workforces with all this diversity of generations and every other kind of diversity. Now, I could see as a manager where you might manage different people differently. But from a company-wide standpoint, if you're trying to change a policy or communicate something or create an incentive program, how do you create something that works for everybody and doesn't irritate some particular group?
You are Generation Z, correct? Yeah. Yeah. And the first thing you said there about managing groups and managing people, it isn't even just about managing groups. It is about managing the individual and knowing what each person needs and how they like to be developed. So I think what you're asking is, how do you spread a mass kind of policy change or message? Okay. It takes a few different methods. So at the top, you have to have the buy-in, you have to have the messaging at the top, you have to have the behaviors at the middle management level, you have to have that grassroots communication, that face-to-face communication, and it is just cascading in multiple ways, in multiple vehicles, that messaging. Sometimes it's one-on-one. Is anybody familiar with kind of the change model where you've got, you know, the people are not bought in, yeah, it goes like this. They're not bought in, they're totally skeptical, and then you achieve buy-in, and then you get to the end of the change management process. A lot of times people stop at the very top of that process, and they just tell. And then when you just tell, and you don't take care of any other of the steps about getting buy-in or engagement, it just doesn't happen. You don't get the change that you need. Woohoo! The National Day of Unplugging starts at sundown today. Thank you. Sundown until sundown on Saturday? Oh, excellent. Okay, let's all do that. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Sani and to Jen for their presentations. And just a little aside here, how timely this topic is. Just the other day, I was reading through an article on the AP, so Associated Press. And this is in a completely different field, but it was about managers, coaches adjust to get the most out of millennials. And this is for those of you who might be fans of that baseball team on the north side. Go White Sox is all I'm going to say about that. In the aftermath of Chicago's collapse last season, Cubs manager Joe Maddon went looking for a deeper understanding of the players who dominate the major leagues these days. Maddon's search took him to Managing Millennials for Dummies. So you can see it plays itself out even in the major league level. Okay, so what I'd like to do now, we've talked about the various generations, how that plays out in the workforce. What we want to focus on next is how we might be able to best focus our marketing and our and services to those generations and our future leaders. So for that, I'd like to welcome Stephanie Prisley to the podium to talk through this topic. Stephanie is an Associate Media Director at Lippman Hearn. Please join me in welcoming Stephanie.
Thank you. So first off, I want to definitely thank the audience that we have today. You guys have been very responsive, which is great. I'm going to be asking out a couple of questions as the previous presenters did. But first I want to start with, I'm going to ask, by a show of hands, how many of you are enjoying yourselves thus far? Great, great. That's good. Excellent. So again, I'm going to be talking about marketing to our future leaders. So this would be marketing, advertising, how you can actually reach out to these younger generations and how that affects some of us in Gen X and baby boomers, because oftentimes we do behave the way these millennials and Gen Z do as well. So first off, I'm going to talk about some of the different marketing channels, starting off with, of course, digital media. A lot of what we've been talking about so far has been digital. We talked about mobile, we talked about their devices, we talked about how they're always on their phones, things like that. And 55% of Gen Z can't go more than 5 hours without being connected to the internet. Now that might sound like, oh wow, 5 hours, that's not really a lot of time. That's only, kind of half of a workday. But for the rest of us, think about, could you go an entire day without being connected to the internet? Now, when we think about the internet, that's also your email. That's also, social media. It's also how you're getting some video. It's how you're getting your breaking news. So how many, by show of hands, think you can go more than 5 hours without being connected to the internet? So no email. Wow, that's great. Wow. So, so let's talk a little first about social media. Social media, of course, is now the big giant when we're talking about digital media. The internet in general is often associated most with social media, entertainment, and content sites with Gen Y and Z. So when you think about being on the internet, the most often what they're going to is on social media. So Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, those things are definitely the most popular and where they're spending the majority of their time. So from a marketing or an advertising standpoint, as a brand, you might think to yourself, well, how can I advertise on social media and know that I'm actually getting to this right audience? So yes, they're spending time there, but it's also an environment that's very cluttered. So how do I break through the clutter? Or I'm able to stand out in a matter of seconds, because oftentimes these video clips are, less than 10 seconds. So you have 1 second, 2 seconds to make an impact if you're trying to break through with your different brand or your product, right? So we're going to talk a bit more about video a little bit later, but if you have to think about these very cluttered environments, these are environments that are more entertainment focused, that are lighthearted kind of content. But if you have a brand or a product or a service that has a little bit more of a serious tone to it, are these the right environments and places for you to be? And there's other sites, BuzzFeed, YouTube, of course, which is huge, and we'll talk a little bit more about YouTube later. Sites like Vice, where they're getting a lot of news and information, is very different from the older generations where we might trust in, say, CNN or your nightly news or NBC or ABC. A lot of this younger generation is getting their actual news, what they're considering facts, from places like BuzzFeed or Vice. So let's talk about, again, kind of digital display or banner ads. So the older generations, once the internet, began to become more commonplace, the first things that we were noticing were banner ads on a website, right? And that's what we associate more so with what the internet is or what advertising might be on the internet. And we oftentimes think about that first, more so than social media or YouTube or things like that. But now we've gotten to a place where banner ads on the internet is not new anymore. The novelty has definitely worn off. So when we're measuring our media and how it's performing, we often are looking at clicks or click-through rate and trying to determine, okay, somebody saw my ad, did they actually click through, did they land on my landing page, right? So 10 years ago, click-through rates were really high because it was new, it was novel, people were really interested. Well, what happens if I click on this? Where do I go? Today, that's so common that people aren't as interested anymore. Now it's almost like wallpaper in the background. So it is still a great awareness driving tool to have banner ads on the internet on various sites, especially if you are aligning to content on the page that's relevant to the reader, then your message is going to align to the person who's reading it, right? But expect that your clicks, your click-through rates are going to be a lot lower than what you may have seen in years past. And also by a show of hands, how many of you have any like ad blockers or pop-up blockers already installed on your desktop or on your phone? Oh, wow, that's a lot more than I expected. So you're probably not even seeing a lot of what's traditional digital advertising even come through anymore, right? So when it comes to online or digital media or advertising, there has to be another way to reach the majority of this group. And the Gen Y and the Gen Z, they are the most likely to immediately install some sort of pop-up blocker or ad blocker on their device or on their desktop. So let's talk about search. If you own a business, or if you have a website, or if you have a blog or something like that, the key for people to find your site, at least organically, is going to be search engine optimization. How many of you have heard that word, or SEO? Okay, great, great. So you know that when you build a website, it's necessary for you to have content and keywords built into the site. So when someone is Google searching or Yahoo searching for a random list of keywords, you want your site to come up first, second, third on the list, or somewhere on that first page. That's going to be most likely coming through with organic search. Paid search are the ads that come above the organic search, right? So oftentimes brands will ask us, should I pay for or bid on a keyword that is also my brand name? Why would I pay for my own name? And the answer that we always give is yes, you should be bidding on and paying on your brand's name, because why? Your competitors are paying for your name. So what you don't want to happen is for someone whose habits are to just type in the Google bar. So if you have your Chrome browser or whatever browser you're using open, that bar at the top that normally says www. whatever, that's also a search bar. So if someone just types in the name of your brand, and then it's going to go to the search page, the query pages that come up, and if your competitor shows up first because they've bought your name, that's not good. You want to make sure that you're there as well. And oftentimes, it's definitely the habit, especially of Gen Y and Z. We're going to click on whatever comes up first. So whoever's at the top must be the most relevant, so that's what I'm going to click on. Now, paid search, again, that allows you to not only come up above the organic search, but this is how you can geo-target or demographically target to a specific audience. So perhaps if you are marketing for or advertising for a specific program, so you have an MBA program or a nursing program, or you're offering a degree or something like that, then you can target just to the specific people within your geography. Maybe you want, a 10-mile radius around your business, or within just the Chicago DMA. You don't want to waste money advertising to all of Illinois because people aren't going to be driving from really far away to get to where you are. Paid search is how you can target to a very specific group of people. And we're going to talk a little bit more about search and what's happening in the future, because search has now changed. It's not just so much typing in the search bar on your desktop or on your laptop. Search has now become voice activated. How many of you have said, "Okay, Google," and have asked a question? And that is going to increase more and more, right? So it's not really visual anymore. Now you're just listening for Google to tell you what the answer is. And that plays a very strong impact in how you're going to be marketing to these generations as well. So let's talk about broadcast media, or what we think about with traditional media. So this is television and radio, right? So everyone here has a television in your house, whether or not you still subscribe to cable or you're utilizing an antenna to get like the local network channels, you're watching some form of TV, right? So radio today, you might be listening to the radio in your car, particularly if you live more in a suburban area. So when you think about marketing to these younger generations, you definitely want to keep in mind as well where they are, right? So let's first talk about television. So 62% of college students watch both broadcast and streaming TV when watching their favorite shows or movies. So when we're talking about streaming TV, well, what is that? That's going to be anything coming through the internet. So that may be on a computer, laptop, desktop. It may be on an iPad. It may be on the phone. What we've learned is that screen size has gotten obviously smaller and smaller, and the younger generations don't mind watching long-form video on a small screen. If you're a Gen X or baby boomer, you'll probably recall, let's say, 15 years ago or so when flat screen TVs were like the new thing. It was bigger. You wanted bigger. You didn't have a 20-inch television anymore. You wanted the 40-inch, the 60-inch. A lot of those flat screen TVs were getting bigger and bigger so you could watch the big game or the Super Bowl. Well, the younger generations, they don't need a big 60-inch television in order to watch a movie or a television show. They can watch it smaller on a laptop, on an iPad mini, a mobile device, and that's absolutely fine, right? So that's going to be anything that's streaming audio, or streaming video, I'm sorry. So also when we're thinking about what is television, think about pre-roll video. And we use the word pre-roll, but pre-roll could also be anything before the actual content starts, somewhere in the middle, also known as mid-roll, or even at the end of the video. Oftentimes when we're watching content online, whether it be YouTube or even a news site, CNN, they have video players on there, obviously. There's a commercial that starts before, depending on how long the video, there may be a commercial in the middle, and it will usually end with a commercial before going into the next segment of content. That is still consumed by Gen Y and Gen Z as television. So the older generations, for us, we may not be thinking about, oh, I'm watching TV. Our mindset is, I'm online, right? I'm on the internet. But to the younger generations, this is watching TV. There's not really a difference between the two. So coming back to YouTube, for Gen Y and Gen Z, YouTube is television. This is where they're watching their shows. So there are YouTube content creators. Their channels are called channels, which is really interesting. So when you think about watching your regular TV and you have the remote in your hand and you're changing the channel, on YouTube, you have a channel. This is a channel that you're watching. So you're watching an actual content creator put together technically a television show. So if you're watching a vlogger who has a 20 or 30-minute video, that's a television show. In the older generations, a 20-minute or 30-minute television show might be called a sitcom. So you're watching a sitcom on the internet, on YouTube. And they have, of course, monetized their channels. So there are commercials that run pre-roll, mid-roll, or at the end. So if you want to reach these younger generations in an area of broadcast, their television is on the internet, right? And then today, that's also including, over-the-top or connected TV. So of you all who have a television in your house, how many of you still pay for and subscribe to cable and also have Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime or something like that? Okay? So those of you who have Netflix or Amazon Prime or Hulu and also have cable, are you spending the majority of your time watching cable? You're spending the majority of your time watching Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime. So why are you still paying for cable? And you might want to think about it. Someone alluded earlier to people are, disconnecting. They're cutting the cable cord. They're finding that they're not spending as much time watching traditional television or cable. We live in a day and age where on demand is how we want to consume our media. And if we think about the younger side of the millennials, and especially Gen Z, they don't know a time without on-demand television. They always had on-demand, to where, you know, Gen X and above, we can remember having the cable set-top box with no remote, where you had to stand there and push the button one at a time in order to change the channels. Well, now, and you had to wait for your program to come on. You would hate for your favorite TV show or movie to end with "to be continued," because that means you had to wait to the next week to see what happened. You don't have to do that today. With Netflix, you can watch the entire season in one sitting. No commercial interruptions, right? So we have to also think about, if you're trying to market to these younger generations, there are opportunities now to run advertising, run commercials, run video through Hulu, Amazon. If you have a Roku, Apple TV, they're offering advertising as well. Netflix, of course, not yet, but they may get there eventually. So let's talk about radio. I mentioned earlier that if you live in a community where you're mostly driving, so not maybe downtown Chicago where you're taking public transportation, but if you're driving in your car, you're probably still listening to a lot of terrestrial radio, or what we know as just traditional radio. If your car is not connected, or if you're not using your mobile device to stream through Pandora or Spotify or some other form of streaming audio, but you're still listening to the radio. To Gen Y and Z, the radio is Pandora, it is Spotify, it's YouTube Music, it's Apple iTunes. That's still considered the radio, because that's where they're getting music, podcast, any sort of talk radio, things like that. And it's very seamless. When they get into their car already has Bluetooth capabilities, and they just connect their phone, or their phone is automatically turned on to Bluetooth, and they hit their Pandora station or hit their Spotify station, and that's the radio, right? So of course there is advertising opportunities on all of these, on Pandora, on Spotify, on YouTube Music. And this is where you can reach Gen Y and Gen Z if you still need to get them on radio. And the consumption of advertising on radio or streaming audio is the same for us as we had in these older generations. The only difference is, rather than a 2-minute block of back-to-back commercials, you may only have a 1-minute block of short 15-second commercials, or 2 30-second commercials. So time has gotten shorter, or commercial lengths have gotten shorter, but the digestion of the information is still the same. So let's talk about print media. We heard probably about, I would say 8 or 9 years ago, that print was dying. A lot of some very small local newspapers across the US were shutting down because so much advertising dollars were going online. But print is not dead. Print is actually still alive. And what keeps print alive is its trustworthiness. Even the younger generations still believe that newspapers, or the content within newspapers or printed media, is still trustworthy. So if you want to position your brand or your product in an environment where you are going to be trusted or digested in a very trusted way, print media still allows for that, right? And when you think about what's been happening in the news lately today, with the internet, a lot of what's on the internet could be considered fake news. So people don't want to trust what they're reading online anymore. They're not quite sure what is actually true. Am I getting actual facts? But if you think about print media, there's oftentimes fact checkers to make sure that what's being printed is actually accurate, right? There's journalists whose job is to be absolutely accurate with what they're printing. But one thing to keep in mind, of course, with this new generation, print is also online. So if you have a newspaper, if you have a magazine, you most likely have a digital version as well. You're doubling your reach by having it in a printed version and having it online. So if you do not have the resources to buy or purchase a print ad within a newspaper, within a magazine, but it's much more efficient from an economic standpoint to put a banner ad within the content of a newspaper, of a magazine on their online version, then that's an opportunity as well. And oftentimes the consumption of the media between the two, as long as the source is reputable, is still very well received by Gen Y and Gen Z. But one of the things that these younger generations are definitely looking for, they want curated information. They want to be able to choose your own adventure. How many of you remember choose your own adventure books from like the 80s? Yes, yeah, I used to love those. They want to choose their own adventure. So they're taking the opportunity to curate very specific topics that are of interest to them to have a personalized experience. So if you have, Google News or Flipboard, you can design your own magazine, so to speak, with specific information tailored towards you. So if you're into food, travel, technology, space, you can literally check mark each of those things and have news given to you that aligns directly with your interest. Now, from a marketing and a brand perspective, that is absolutely excellent, because if you have a product or a service or a brand or a degree that is aligning directly to a keyword or a subject or a topic, you can know that by selecting a specific topic, you are reaching people who have indicated that they have a specific interest in what it is you might have to, whatever product you're selling, right? So you want to make sure that there is a direct correlation between your business and who your audience is going to be. And there's opportunity there to curate that. We talked a little bit earlier about just the internet in general and how newspapers and magazines are making online versions. There's other opportunities to reach out to them as well. Most newspapers, most magazines, or even bloggers for that matter, they will have an email list where they can send out e-newsletters, email blast to specific subscribers who have opted in to receive information from that publication. And again, as a brand, as a company, you want to be able to align specifically to that audience, to that content, and that makes you more trustworthy. So let's talk a little bit more about outdoor, or out of home as it's often called. So out of home or outdoor marketing is anything that is outside of the house. So it's not only highway billboards that you see driving down 290, it's bus shelters, it's transit, it could be chalk design on a sidewalk, anything that is literally outside or outdoors. So research has said that Gen Z college students are 11 times more likely to look at outdoor ads on campus. But if you think about their actual behavior, they're walking on campus, they're walking between classes, they're eating lunch outside, they're spending time on campus, outside, quite a bit, right? And so when they see advertising on campus, which is already trustworthy for them, those messages definitely are going to resonate with them as well, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're on their devices a little bit, but they do look up. You kind of have to know where you're going, at least a little bit. And of course, the thing about outdoor is you want to kind of go big or go home. Outdoor is an awareness driving vehicle. You're not expecting anybody to click through to get to your website. You may not necessarily even be expecting any other sort of immediate call to action, but you need people to see your logo. You need people to see your tagline and to know just a bit of information about yourself, which is what outdoor is all about, right? So outdoor has gone digital. So as you probably have seen, most of the highway billboards have even gone from being vinyl static now to LED digital. Why are they doing that? Not only does it look better, but you can have more advertisers run on the same board. So now your ad is being rotated in, usually with 3 other advertisers. Most outdoor companies will sell space to 4 different advertisers per board. So you're only getting 25% of the impressions that you would normally get had you had a static board where it was 100% you all the time for the entire duration of your flight, of your 4 weeks or 8 weeks or however you're on there. I said, however, because the younger generation specifically digest information faster, they're still able to get your full message even on a digital board that you're rotating with other advertisers on, even if they're unrelated advertisers. So not only are there LED digital highway boards, but even bus shelters are becoming dynamic, interactive. You can have a bus shelter and shine your logo on the ground. You can see in this picture here where this gentleman is actually interacting with the board and actually typing something out. Those are opportunities that are being sold even here in the city, right? And then also, one of the things you definitely want to consider when marketing to this young generation is their habits. What are their habits? Where are they? What are they doing? I talked a little bit about, the suburbs versus the city, right? So if you have a business or you're trying to attract this generation in downtown Chicago, transit is going to be very important. Do you want to advertise on the metro train, on the CTA, on buses, on bus shelters? That's a very different lifestyle than living out in the suburbs where you have to drive from one destination to another. It's another customer experience when you live on campus. As a college student, I lived on campus all 4 years of school. I never moved off campus or got an apartment off campus. I lived in the dorms the entire time. So my life was on campus. I didn't take public transportation or anything like that, right? So consider exactly who your audience is, where they are, and how you need to best interact with them. So let's talk a little bit more about the preferences and the priorities of this Gen Y and Gen Z. So Gen Z, this generation, they view the physical world and the digital world as one. They didn't grow up in an era where digital was new or the internet was new. It was already in place. So that is their whole world. They're already thinking about these things all together in one. They're the mobile first generation. I believe somebody spoke about that earlier. They grew up already having a cell phone, particularly a smartphone. How many of you can remember when cell phones came with an attached bag? Did anybody own one of those? Wow. I think about that. So I have an older brother who's 3 years older than me, and he has this picture of his senior prom with him and his friends are out to dinner. You would go out to dinner before the actual prom, and one of his friends had a cell phone with the attached bag sitting on the table, and somebody took a picture, trying to look cool, of course, on the phone. And I'm like, wow, could you imagine walking around today with a little bag to have your phone attached to it? No, of course not. So when the bag went away and you had a standalone cell phone, you may have had, the Motorola Razr, or you had a Palm Pilot, or something like that, the very early versions of the smartphone. You may have had a BlackBerry. So the fact that you could type on it or email, that was new and innovative at the time. Well, this Gen Z, they didn't have any of that. If you showed a Gen Z, or even probably a Gen Y, a cell phone with a bag attached or a Motorola Razr, they would be like, what is this? Where are the apps? What am I supposed to do with this, right? So they are definitely on their phone. But what we want to talk about specifically with being mobile first, from a marketing perspective, is what is the actual user experience, right? So when people are on their phone and you're serving them an ad, what is it you're expecting them to do in that moment? Do you want them to click through and land on your website or on your landing page? And then once they get to your website, what do you expect for them to do next? That's what you have to keep in mind. What do you expect for them to do next? It's one thing to get to your website, but if there's nothing to do next, they'll just go away. Do you want them to fill out a form? How long is your form? How does your form look on a mobile device? Could you imagine from a user perspective, a Gen Y or Gen Z taking the time to type in their name, first and last, their email address, their phone number, and whatever other contact information that you're expecting from their phone? The answer, and this gentleman here is shaking like, no, I'm not doing that. Who does that? I don't have time for that. There are opportunities, especially with some social media, Facebook and LinkedIn, where they have lead gen forms that automatically populates the name and the phone number and the email address based on their profile information. But that can be dangerous as well because Gen Y and Gen Z is an extremely creative generation. They like to make up names. So oftentimes the name that they're using on their Instagram profile, on their Facebook page, on their Snapchat is not the same name on their birth certificate. What we found in some of our marketing is that they will include emojis or characters in their name. What am I supposed to do with that? I can't, this is not your actual name. So that's something to keep in mind as an advertiser. What type of information am I getting back from this younger generation? Am I getting an actual first name and an actual last name that I can identify? And oftentimes this generation is not also thinking about their email address. Their email address is oftentimes not their name. It's some made-up word or a combination of letters and numbers, trying to be kind of anonymous as they live their lives online, which is very different from Gen X and above, because when we first had the opportunity to create our own email, the first thing you thought about was my name. I didn't make up a name and add characters and emojis in my name. I used my actual birth certificate, first name and last name, right? So how many of you of the Gen Y and Gen Z that we have here are using your actual first name and last name across all of your social media and your email? There's a few of you. So the rest of you, so show me hands of those who are not. You've made up a name. Wow. You've actually made up a name. So are you trying to hide? Are you in a witness protection program? No? Okay. Well, that's just something to definitely think about. Think about the user experience. And the key takeaway here, again, is from a digital perspective, from a mobile perspective, what is it that you expect for your customer to do next after they've landed on your website? How many of you know who this person is? Can you guys see around me? I'll walk over here. You guys know who this person is? Okay. So we're going to talk about influencers and content. For those of you who don't know, this guy's name is Casey Neistat. He's a filmmaker and a YouTube content creator. As of yesterday, he is just shy of 11 million subscribers to his YouTube channel. He's an entrepreneur, an all-around adventurer, and he's had several YouTube videos go viral. There are brands who send to him through the mail boxes and boxes. If you watch his channel, you're probably familiar with, he used to do something called mail time, because he would just have stacks and stacks and stacks of boxes of brands who would send him their product, just hoping that he would open it and talk about it on his channel, because they knew that if he did that, that they would get hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of views on their product. And that was an opportunity for them to get people to know who they are, go to their website, and potentially make a sale. So of you who know who Casey Neistat is, you've probably seen him ride around on his boosted board, right? So those of you who don't know, a boosted board is an electric skateboard. And he's often riding around New York City on his Boosted board. He is not sponsored by Boosted board. They have not paid him to talk about the Boosted board or to ride the Boosted board, but he loves it so much, and it's his primary mode of transportation when he's in the city. He lives in New York City, that brands are constantly wanting to have the same level of success Boosted board has had, right? So that's why they continue to send it to him. So I talk about influencers because influencers have power. How many of you recognize this picture here? All right, for those of you who don't, this is from the failed Fire Festival. You've probably heard in the news recently there are documentaries on both Hulu and Netflix about the Fire Festival. It was a music festival similar to Lollapalooza or Coachella that was supposed to happen in the Bahamas. But due to extremely poor planning, it was an epic failure, and the guy who tried to put it on is currently in prison. So you don't want to do what he did. But if you watch the documentary, particularly the one that's on Hulu, it talks a lot about influencer culture. So what the guy did to promote this festival was that he paid influencers. So Kendall Jenner was paid $250,000 to make one Instagram post about the Fire Festival, because she had so many Instagram followers, and he knew that people would know about it, it would go viral, they would hear about it, and they would all fall into the trap of what we call FOMO, fear of missing out. Gen Y and Gen Z, because of social media, because of the internet, often fall into this fear of missing out culture. They want to be whatever's the coolest, whatever's the most beautiful. They don't want to be seen as one who's not able to participate, right? So the entire Fire Festival ultimately failed because of poor planning, influencer culture, and fear of missing out. Oh, let me go back, actually. So for the key takeaway here is, as an advertiser or as a brand or as a company, there's opportunity for you to take advantage of influencer marketing by identifying influencers. So an influencer would be somebody who has some level of social media following, right? And it may not even just be social media. It could be somebody who's a blogger or some form of content creator who has generated a high number of following. And that could be globally, like Casey Neistat, nationally, or even locally. Identify the people, or even when we're talking about Elmhurst College, there may be students on campus who are popular. They have an actual following, and those students or those people is who you want to identify to be able to work with, whether paid or unpaid, or maybe some form of internship, where they can talk about your messages or your brand, and that can generate a buzz, so to speak, about you because you're utilizing those influencers. So video. We talked earlier about television and streaming audio. I wanted to talk a little bit more about video. Video content is king, and it's king for several different reasons. And probably the most number one reason for that I've noted here is you can gain knowledge and insight and know-how very quickly. And it transcends community, it transcends through all diversity, it even transcends language barriers. You can watch a video online and learn how to do something with no sound. You don't need to hear what the person is saying in order to be able to digest the message. So that is what makes video king. But one thing to keep in mind is it's not that the attention span so much of Gen Y and Z has gotten shorter. They have trained their brains to consume information faster. So back in the day, you might have a 60-second video, which is a standard commercial length. Then that kind of gotten shortened down to 30 seconds. But today, we're talking about 5 seconds, 6 seconds, 10 seconds. A advertisement on Snapchat is only 10 seconds. So think about how you can convey your brand or your message in that short of a time. You need to be able to convey who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in, and what you expect for your customer or the audience to do once they get to your website in a very short amount of time. The other thing to consider with video, again, when we're talking about this mobile first generation, is aspect ratio. 7, 8, 9 years ago, when websites became responsive on a mobile device, it was, groundbreaking that you could have a video turn horizontally. So you would turn your phone horizontally to watch a video in a standard format. Well, today's younger generation, they don't really need to turn their mobile device horizontally. They want to see things vertically because that's the user experience that they're already in. So if you're producing video, keep in mind or strongly consider vertical video, especially if you plan to advertise that in social media like Instagram or Insta Stories or Facebook Stories or something, or Snapchat, where the experience is vertical. And oftentimes brands say, well, I don't have the money to produce a commercial video, but you really don't need to do that. It's all about just light motion, just something to catch the eye. All right, I only have a few minutes left, so I'm going to kind of quick. So let's talk a little bit about the future. The future is already now. Machine learning is already in effect. What we've learned is over the next 5 years, 30% of all generations expect the internet or anything online to know what they need even before they need it. And that is because of machine learning. And they know, the internet knows who you are, it knows where you've been, it knows what you're going to do next, it knows your habits. And there is now programmatic digital banner ad advertising where you can plug in your geography, demographic keywords about who your audience is, and allow the machine to go big data, programmatic data, proprietary information to find those people for you. So we as marketers, as advertisers, we're not spending as much time looking for these people with a lot of research the way we used to. Just plug it into the machine and the machine will find them. How many of you are utilizing Google Home or Siri or have an Alexa? That's great. So remember earlier I talked about paid search versus organic search. This is the future of search. People are no longer spending a lot of time, especially these younger generations, typing keywords into a search bar. They're just saying, okay, Google, find me the nearest Italian restaurant. And if you have purchased those keywords, you're going to want Google Home or Siri or Alexa to mention your business, your product, your service first. Very quickly, the relevance of traditional marketing channels. We've talked a lot about the internet, a lot about how the younger generation consumes media, but let's not forget, there are still tens of millions of Americans who are utilizing, who are still reading, who are still digesting, who are still consuming media from traditional channels. And a lot of that is because traditional media is the most trustworthy. It has, it's where true journalism takes place. Again, I talked earlier about how much of the information that's on the internet can be seen as fake news. People don't know whether or not to trust it or not. But the traditional media channels are still key and very important because this is where people are trusting the information that they're getting. And a lot of people are not early adopters. It took, some people a long time before they bought a cell phone, a long time before they had a laptop or something like that. They don't just jump with first generation technology. They may wait for third generation technology when the prices come down or all of the bugs are kind of already worked out. So if you are a Gen Y or a Gen Z and you're working on a startup or you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking about attracting, or you have a product or a service that may be targeting to a Gen Xer or a baby boomer or above, you want to make sure that you're considering traditional media as well. Thank you very much. So I just want to maybe have another no matter time, but are there any questions? Is there anybody who had a question in mind? Yeah. Yes.
I can't even remember being an old guy like me, whatever generation I am. The rotary dial phone.
Right.
Okay, so my prediction is 10 years from now, we're going to be looking at these cell phones saying, man, remember we used to carry these clunky things around? What's going to replace it? Chips in our brain or what? You heard it here first, by the way.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I have a feeling that cell phones are going to go back to getting smaller. I talked a little bit earlier about how 15 years ago or so, televisions were getting bigger and bigger when they came out with the flat screen. Everybody wanted 40-inch, 60-inch, and it got really big. And then we've gotten to a point where, they've gotten small. But if you'll notice with a lot of cell phones are getting bigger again. You have the regular iPhone, but then you have the iPhone Plus. And I feel like it's interesting that people would want to carry around such a large screen phone, especially for a Gen Y or Gen Z, because you probably don't have vision problems the way a baby boomer may have. So why do you have this big phone? I have a feeling that they're going to get smaller again. And remember the Bluetooth earpieces? You don't really see as many people carrying those around or wearing those as much anymore. I have a sense that we're going to go back to another generation of a Bluetooth earpiece. Yeah.
One of the things that recently is they're talking about the next generation is that your screen will fold up or roll up.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's very true. I know Samsung, their next generation phone that they're advertising now actually unfolds to a bigger screen. And I feel like that is because people are spending less on computers. So gone are the days of the big desktop. Laptops now are going to get smaller or become more obsolete with the younger generation because they want to be as mobile as possible. So something that can fit into your pocket, fit into your purse, that you can kind of whip out and still have the same functionality that you do on a laptop. Is the reason why those things are kind of coming into play. But yeah, we'll see how much that kind of catches on. Yeah, very good questions. Thank you so much.
Our next session will be our panel discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. Simpson. Sani will be moderating that again. I did want to make a couple of mentions here. Several people have asked this question, whether or not the presentations that you have seen will be made available. We have, for those of you who have RSVP'd, we have your email addresses, and our plan will be to send that out. And the other thing is we've been videotaping this as well. So this presentation, the symposium, will be available at some point, either online or through a service like Comcast. So again, you should be able to access it again if you'd like to in the future. So with that, what I will do is I will turn it over to Sani, who will then ask our panelists, our esteemed panelists, to join our presentation.
Hi, can you guys hear me better today now? Yes, awesome. All right, I'm going to ask each panelist to come up and take their seat, and they'll introduce themselves one at a time. So India, would you like to come forward and face the crowd? And then why don't we let everybody come sit as well? Joe, and then Jonathan, and then Victoria. Sorry, I was Victory. Oh, you guys are cheating, going up the big stair. All right, so India, would you like to share just a little bit about yourself? What generation are you defining yourself in?
My name is India Wortham.
Can you hear India?
My name is India Wortham, and I define myself as a millennial after today's session.
And then where do you work? What do you do? Give us a little bit of background.
I currently work for the Wiegand Center for Professional Excellence here at Elmhurst College. I am a new addition to the college. I recently left corporate America. I worked for a financial investment research firm in Chicago in HR, and then I guess, decided I needed to make the switch. I wasn't having any passion connections, so I'm here at Elmhurst.
Thank you. Awesome. We love having her here. And Joe, tell us about yourself, generation, and what you're up to.
Gotcha. So my name's Joe Palandri. I'm a Generation Z, but I'm kind of right in between Y and Z. I have older siblings that are Ys, so I'm kind of in between. I don't really know which one I'm more of at the moment, especially after everything here, and now I'm just really confused.
We didn't mean to give you an identity crisis. I'm so sorry.
It happens. So currently I'm working in Elmhurst at Roche Cars doing social media, which again is a very Generation Z thing, I know. And then it's my last semester here at Elmhurst College where I'm a business and psychology major, so kind of figuring out exactly what my next steps are going to be and seeing what that transition's really going to look like for myself.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Hello, can you? Yeah, can you hear me? Okay,
there
great.
There we go. Jonathan's up.
Hi, everyone. My name's Jonathan Cook. I'm a proud millennial. I grew up here in Elmhurst. I went to York, got my computer engineering degree from Notre Dame, and then spent 5.5 years as an IT consultant at Deloitte. And so, as Jen mentioned earlier, I am the guy that is going to, or that has quit my job and is going to move into my van to basically pursue a couple separate passions of mine, those being mainly music, technology, and fitness. So.
Hi, I'm Victoria Hines, and I'm a financial assistant at New Homestar. It's a company right here in Elmhurst. It's actually like right over the tracks. We could have skipped here if we wanted to. And I also grew up in Elmhurst, went to York High School, and know the area pretty well. So, yeah. Hi.
And you consider yourself?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I'm a millennial.
Okay.
Yeah.
She was like, it goes without saying. All right, so I have a series of questions that you all provided me and that the speakers had provided earlier as well, and so I'm going to go back and forth. And I'm going to throw it out to the panel, and then whichever one of you want to pick it up can do so. And I know you've seen some of these questions. So, but the first thing I'm going to ask you is, after today's presentations and then from your own real-world experiences, what's the one thing that each of you wished older generations understood about your generation? And what's the one thing you wish your generation understood about the older generations? So I'm going to let you think about that for a moment. They're like, I don't know if I can say it out loud.
I guess I can take a crack at it first. I think for me, I think in terms of what I wish, older generations would understand about my generation is that, to me, it's like culture is king in the workplace and that money doesn't really matter. I think, when I was at Deloitte Consulting, a lot of the work that we do, I mean, the bottom line is important. I was a consultant working for Fortune 500 companies, and that was a big deal. And so I think, at least for me personally, and I think, a lot of other folks or millennials, culture and like the motivation behind what you're doing is what's most important, was what I found. And then I guess on the flip side, in terms of what I wish the older generations understood, what I understand about, or what I think that we need to understand about the older generation. I always think we can show a lot more empathy towards the older generation. I mean, I think that, I think one of the presentations mentioned how, they kind of like the older generation looks at us like, oh, those millennials, like those kids. And so I think in some ways, some of my peers, and I do this myself too sometimes, we kind of get frustrated, I think, with the older generation, like, oh, they don't understand me. And I think if we just spend more time trying to understand them, I think that goes a long ways. I mean, it's a two-way street,
Right, okay. And I think you just reiterated that it sounds like you focus more on the why than the what.
Yeah.
Right, okay, all
All right, so then kind of go off of what Jonathan just said, what I wish that my generation and our generations understood more about the older generations were that at some point, like we mentioned, every single one of us in this room was part of the punk kid generation, that the generation above is always going to look down on the younger generation, be like, oh, they don't know what they're doing and they're doing this wrong. And that's just part of life. So I wish that the older generation understood that about the current millennials and X and Y and Z, whatever. Just so that they were like, oh, wait, we've been in their shoes before. It's a different situation, but we've been there. And then at the same time, but looking at it from the other side, I wish that our generation understood that the people who are in charge in the workforce, they really do want the best for us and for everything that's going on, but they just are going to go about it in a different way because they were raised in a different way. And as much as we want to be looked at situationally, then we're going to have a broad sweeping view about the people that are in charge, and that's not fair either. So if we can both have that respect and think situationally about each other, I think that'll lead to a lot better possibilities.
All right. India and Victoria, do you want to chime in, or can I go to the next question? I can go to the next. They're like, they covered it. All right. So this builds on that. Every generation has positive and negative characteristics. Why is there such a big focus on the negative characteristics of generations Y and Z? And how about focusing on maximizing those positives? Do you feel the workplace is biased against generation Y and Z?
So I think that everyone focuses on the negatives because it's all over social media. Everything's posted. You can see the upbringing, and you couldn't see that with the older generations, and they don't realize that. So I do think that there's like a negative stigma against millennials. Like when I found out that I was a millennial, I'm like, no. I can't be, Right. But after hearing all the explanation of it, it makes sense. And I can see myself, but I can also see myself in the Generation X category. I could see myself in the baby boomer category. I think that to put a stereotype on it, in a sense, is it tries to put too much of a clear definition on something that's kind of just everyone's themselves. You know what I mean? So.
Sure. So the card says every generation has positive and negative characteristics. Why is there such a big focus on the negative characteristics of Gens Y and Z? And how about focusing on the positive characteristics? Is there a workplace bias against X and Y? I mean, Y and Z. Sorry. X, Y, Z, Y, Z.
To answer the second part, and this is from my perspective of working in HR, I would say it depends on the company culture, which kind of dictates how they view Generation Y and Z. I worked for a tech startup kind of finance firm, very cutting edge, and they embraced the generation. So I would say it really depends on the organization and how they view everyone, and they try to find a happy balance between every generation in the workforce because they saw what everyone brought to the table. So they needed the knowledge experts, the subject matter experts to be able to help the Generation Y and Z to be able to perform their best work. So I really feel it really depends on the organizational culture and how they view it.
Okay. When looking for new employment opportunities, where do you first begin searching?
First, I began searching on Indeed, so using an app, kind of seeing what's out there. And then after searching on the app on Indeed or LinkedIn, I start to call my friends to see who has something in their organization or have they heard anything.
For me, it might be a little bit different just because I have the benefit of still being in school and going here. So a quick plug for our Wagon Center. It's really easy to use the EC Connect thing, which is for people who have gone to Elmhurst or even people in the area that are posting jobs. It's a job board. You can go on there. You can look around. I've met with my advisor in the Wagon Center countless times to go over things. Just kind of doing all of that, it makes it really easy for me. And it's a nice first step, but then beyond that, I would say going to Indeed or different job boards, things like that. There's tons of things all over the internet to do as well.
Let's see if Gen Y is different than Gen Z.
So I think for me, I'm a consultant, So relationships, are king as well. And so, for me, I think whenever I'm thinking about like a new position or something that I need to accomplish, I'm always thinking first about like, how can I get face-to-face, experience with someone to understand what that experience is like. I guess I do feel that I do not resonate as much with millennials in terms of the face-to-face piece. I love meeting face-to-face. And I think that might be a byproduct of kind of what my career path was right out of school. But yeah, like when I start to think about, how I'm going to accomplish something, it would be natural to turn, I guess, first sort of to the search engines, et cetera. But for me, it's all about my uncle, actually. My Uncle Paul, he says, life's all about relationships. And I think that that's very true, especially in the workplace.
I agree. I think for me, face-to-face and like using your network is really like my go-to. My friends, my family, who do you know, who can I reach out to, things like that. And getting that face-to-face time, because as I've said in countless interviews, anyone can make themselves look good on paper. And I think that your personality really comes through when you can talk to someone and show your personality and show how you are and things like that. But I think like networking is definitely the biggest piece.
I'm going to combine two questions here, so hold on and see if I can pull this off. So one of our cards is work organizational culture important to you? What does a great work culture look like to you? And then one of the questions we had given you before was, what is your current employer doing to successfully keep you engaged? Or what are they doing successfully to keep you engaged? And I'm wondering if those are related.
Yeah, I mean, I said it earlier. For me, culture is so important. If you guys, Google did a project called Project Aristotle. I think it was called Project Aristotle, and they basically surveyed a bunch of teams at Google and tried to figure out what their teams did that made them so great. And they basically found that there was only one factor, and it was this thing called psychological safety. And it was this idea that within a team, you're not afraid to be wrong. And so for me, I think culture, like the cultures that I look for in businesses where I want to go work, is this idea that I can be myself, I can be an individual. I'm not afraid to bring who I am to work every single day. And for me, that's going to be so much more important for wanting to work somewhere, as opposed to, like what's the byproduct of, what's the product that we're selling, et cetera. Like culture, again, is so important.
So I would say culture as well. When I look for a new employment, I always try and make sure that I'm a good fit and I like what they have to bring to the table and what they're offering me. And if it's not a good cultural fit, then I won't go there. And also what I would find when I was performing exit interviews with individuals from my previous role, when I would ask them what did they like about the company, 99% of the time when employees were leaving, they always said, I love the culture. I hate that I'm leaving, but I could say that I love the culture. I love the people that I worked with. And I would say that's a big part of what a lot of people look for now.
Go ahead.
No. Okay. I think culture too. And I was always looking for like work-life balance, and at my company, like they're the best. And there's so many things that they do to keep everyone engaged and keep everyone on track and wanting to do better and wanting to perform better, not only for the company, but for themselves. And they really like inhabit that individualism, I guess. And they're big on professional and personal development, because they know for me to grow is only going to benefit them, I guess, in a way. And I think that's huge. And plus I have kids. So like the work-life balance, being able to work from home if I need to, understanding that life happens is so huge, because I used to want the money, and then looking at these cookie cutter corporate places, it's so different, and you're just a number, and it's not like that. And there's places that aren't like that, and that's who I think everyone should try to strive to be like.
So you just led into another question that I was provided, which is, does your employer offer flexibility or other perks that you value beyond insurance and vacations?
Yeah.
Okay, there's the answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, we have work from home. We have, like, I want to say, like, unlimited time off if we need to. They're very understanding. They're very easy to get along with. They understand everything is the biggest thing. And it's great. There's other perks and stuff involved, but that's just the biggest thing. It's understanding that life happens. Because so many times you get punished for things that are completely out of your control at other places. And I've been punished for things that I had no control over at other places. And the understanding is huge for me.
Yeah, so I actually, Deloitte offers a sabbatical program if you're there for longer than 2 years, and so I took advantage of that when I was 3.5 years into the firm. It was basically the first time that I, was questioning whether or not this was the right job for me, and I took advantage of this program, and I got 6 months off to go volunteer, and so I rode my motorcycle around the country and volunteered at different nonprofit organizations that supported low-income families, and so, for me, that was definitely the difference maker for why I ended up being with the firm for 5.5 years as opposed to 3 years or 3.5 years. And so, we have like great flexible benefits, but also some of those longer term benefits to help you go and pursue some passions to see if it's something that you like. And then, most often, people go on sabbatical and then they come back and then they become Deloitte lifers. Like that happens way more often than not. It's uncommon that, someone comes back and then works for a year and then goes and lives in a van.
Down by the river? Oh, if you laughed at that, you might have been a certain generation. So I'm going to ask a question that I think your careers have already demonstrated the answer to. But in looking for jobs and as you're planning your careers going forward, do you see value in committing your career to one company?
No. I hate to be like so blunt with the answer. I guess the thing about it is that, I think myself and many other millennials, like we see ourselves sort of as on this journey, kind of trying to understand who we are, who we want to be, what we want to do. And so it's just the odds, it's unlikely that you're going to find a company that's going to you're going to be on that journey with for your entire life. Right. And then the other thing is that, I don't necessarily feel, I guess myself and potentially other millennials, I don't feel like I need the security of being with a firm for 25, 30 years. For myself, like I just quit my job. I'm self-employed. I guess self-employed now. I don't make any money. I think that's definitely a generational gap. When I left the firm, there was a lot of people, especially my managers, that I talked to who were either baby boomers or Gen X. And, they're just like, I can't believe you're just going to leave. Like, what are you going to do? And so I think that is certainly starting to shift. And even more so, as you look into Gen Z, it just doesn't seem like it's as much of an importance anymore.
I would say from my perspective, it's a little different. I do agree with you on some points, but it's more, I guess, personal. I feel it's important to invest time with the company and not job hop. However, I do feel it's important to constantly grow and develop and see what's out there. And my perspective comes from seeing my parents and seeing my great-grandparents work for a company for many years, dedicating their entire lives, 25, 30, 40 years to one company, and then have layoffs. And then their whole world is shattered. And then they had nothing else to fall back on. So I've learned from them that I should at least constantly be looking, paying attention, seeing what's out there and knowing that I have other opportunities other than being with one company that could let me go at any moment.
Yeah, for myself, as I look for getting into what could potentially be a lifelong career or could potentially be a few years long career, I see advantages to both just because if you are with the same company, you're going to make all those connections. You're going to understand that company extremely well, hopefully at least, and you can really do some great things with that company. But then on the other side, if you are with this one company for 5 years, you learn how they work, you learn some skills from that company, and then you can learn skills from another one. And after you've gone to a few different ones and gotten plenty of different experiences, you'll be a much more varied and well-versed employee for whatever company you do end up with, and hopefully then you can spend some more time at that career.
I disagree. I think that like longevity in a company is huge, and that's kind of where I would say I differ in my generation stereotype, because I've seen the good and the bad of it, but I think that if you're in the right company and if they're there to help you grow with them and have you grow personally, why wouldn't you stay loyal to something like that? It's almost like a relationship, you know what I mean? Like, everyone has to give a little bit, and it takes a lot of hard work, and there's good days, there's bad days, there's, but you have to stick it out sometimes. And with certain things, you have to think long term. You have to have that longevity aspect to it.
So, what do you most value then, as far as thinking about careers? And I'm going to switch to some marketing questions.
For me personally, I value being valued. When you go to a company and you feel appreciated, you feel that your ideas aren't just dumb or useless or something like that. It's obviously a key factor. For example, with social media, it's something that was new for the company that I'm at. So ideas that I had were either, oh, that's really cool, let's look into it. And if it worked, it didn't. But if it was going to be bad based off of the knowledge that was there at that company already, it wasn't, no, stop, you're stupid. It was, we've kind of looked into that. We've seen it didn't really work, but how about if we change it to doing something like this? So if you're at a company and you can truly feel valued, to me, that's what's most important.
So thinking, I'm going to segue with values, thinking into brands. For the brands you're most loyal to, and it could be in any category, any industry, it doesn't matter. Why? Why are you loyal to those?
Disney, for sure.
So you're most loyal to Disney. Why?
Because my kids love Disney. And that's the only, sane time I get in my house. So Disney, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very loyal to outdoor brands, so specifically Patagonia. Patagonia, if you know, does a really great job with all of their sourcing of their materials. I think for me, when I look at a brand that I'm actually going to invest in and continually, purchase their products, I'm curious about what they're doing, what their values are as a business, and how they're, whether it's clothes, how they're sourcing their materials, or basically, how they're spending their money. That's important to me.
For me, one of the biggest brands that I'm hugely loyal to is Nike, which, yeah, there's pros and cons to Nike, of course. But I really love what they've done a lot with Colin Kaepernick lately, which he's someone that stood up for what he believed in, and everyone could have just forgotten about him, or the sports world could have completely forgotten about him. And instead, Nike just gave him a whole collection. And there's a brand that they could have just kept selling shoes and shirts and whatever, but they've decided to go above and beyond that and put meaning into shoes and shirts and whatever, which is huge to me, because I always believe in nothing is ever as simple as just the product that you're buying. You're also buying the experience. You're buying the meaning of it. So them taking the time to put that into it is something that I really appreciate.
You can answer if you want, or I can. She's like, go. So how do you find out about the brands that you're talking about? How do you know this?
For me personally, I think a lot of it just comes with the news sources that I look into, because as much as I like to stay up to date on political things or just multinational different things that go on, a lot of what I like to keep up with is the brands that I'm passionate about, because being hugely interested in the automotive field or interested in new products, I'm always looking, I'm always reading for what's next and just about the brands, because if the brand interests me, it should interest me in all assets of it. So what it's doing with its persons, what it's doing with its products, everything like that is just something that I'm going to look into for the company. So I'll go online, and usually those are the articles that get pulled up just on the news sources that are going to interest me in general anyway.
So what's the best way to communicate and have your generations retain information? This may have been asked as a management question, but I'm asking it in the marketing area, so you can answer it either way.
I certainly think leading by example and then also experience, like hands-on, that's the biggest thing. You know, I think for me, and you know, in my time at Deloitte, I was there for 5 years. I got the chance to, you know, lead others and be a manager. And for me, I mean, you know, teaching someone how to do something and then allowing them to do it, allowing them to, you know, have room to fail and to figure it out on their own, that's so important. I think that, you know, when if you come to work and on your first day you just get this giant training manual and you're expected to read it, I mean, that's just totally missing the point.
Yeah, kind of to go off of that, I'll completely agree with the experience thing, especially being the Gen Zer. Everyone always thinks like, oh, you can watch this video or you can do this online tutorial. All of that is terrible to do and you don't retain any of it, and it's just the most brain-numbing experience ever. Yeah, I'm sure you've all had to do something like that at some point, and it's just not a fun experience, and the experience doesn't have to be fun. Like Jonathan mentioned, failure is one of the best teachers, because once you mess up and you know you've messed up, you're not going to make that mistake again, or at least hopefully not. So having that failure, having those opportunities to actually do it, you can then ingrain it and get that experience, and then you truly will learn it.
So interactive, engaged application, the coaching comments that were made earlier. Yeah.
I think in Jen's presentation, she talked about the GROW method, which I had never heard of, but I've seen it in action, I guess. And I think one of the questions was, why take the extra time to do that rather than if it takes 30 seconds to tell them how to do it? And I think it's like what's the fishing thing? Yeah, and exactly, he can eat forever, but you hand him a fish and he'll eat for a day. Like, it's the same type of thing. So while it might only take you 30 seconds to tell me how to do something, if you take that 5 minutes to explain it to me, I will not be asking you to do it again. Now I know how to do it and I understand why we do it this way. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So.
And I think the GROW method was as much about you discovering how to do it than them explaining it, right?
Right, yeah. Like it's more like process oriented, I guess, hands-on.
Right. And that's typical of your, the process versus output is important. I'm totally stereotyping. I hate that. Did India?
I was going to say a combination of video, actually just finding a happy medium, but a combination of video learning, face-to-face, but then having that coaching, constant communication, constant feedback both ways, and being able to give constructive criticism.
Okay. So thinking about your smartphones for a moment. With all the things on your smartphones, which app do you use the most?
Gmail. Because I do it personal and for work. So it takes up most of my life.
Pinterest is the one I use the most.
Yep.
Instagram, for sure.
Yeah, Instagram as well.
Okay. Now, why? Why are you using Instagram and Pinterest? And I understand the Gmails. You're communicating, right? Okay.
For me, Instagram, it's a way to communicate with my friends based off the messages. It's part of my job, which is a super fun part of my job. And then also there are ways to get news and everything else like that on it. And since it's so quick, I can just scroll through in a few minutes in between whatever I'm doing, and then I'm done. And as much as I'm a Gen Z, I'm really not on my phone all that much. So having that quick just scroll through is perfect for me.
Yeah, I think with Instagram, for me, I mean, it's definitely, you asked earlier about like how you find out about these brands. I mean, going online, seeing influencers and ambassadors, et cetera. But for me, for Instagram, I mean, it's such a creative and it's just a great platform to like get inspired. And so that's a big reason for me too.
Pinterest, for me, I use it for a variety of reasons. One, to figure out the meals for the week for my family. Two, to figure out what fashion I want my son to wear, or planning his birthday party, or anything that I have from a Christmas event. I use it for every aspect of my life.
So is technology a help or a hindrance in creative problem solving?
I would definitely say it's a help. Like India was just talking about, Pinterest. If you have never been on Pinterest, I really don't use it all that much, but there's a million ways to do literally everything on Pinterest, you could probably find 500 ways to tie your shoe. So if you have a problem and you're looking for a different way to solve it, or if you can't figure out a way to do something or an idea about something, looking it up on different social medias, especially Pinterest, trust me, you'll find more ideas than you know what to do with, and you'll actually have too many.
I used to be all about using technology in the creative process, and I wanted everything to be, in a OneNote or somewhere that I can like easily search. But I'm finding now actually more and more that I'm reverting backwards in some cases to not using technology, because I think it does allow for a lot more creativity. So sometimes, there's something to be said about just going to a whiteboard with somebody and just brainstorming and figuring out, where to go from there. Then you integrate the technology and use it and leverage it. But I think both, it's important to utilize both, yeah.
I would say utilizing both and finding a happy medium. I've found in the last 2 years that I cut back and I deleted a lot of my social media apps, so I'm kind of down to only like 3. I deleted Facebook, I deleted Instagram, I deleted Snapchat, and I found in the last 3 years I'm a lot happier. I'm not comparing myself to others, and I've been able to be the most productive and creative person professionally in those 2 years, and being spending more time with my son. So
yeah. I agree, where it's it's a help and a hindrance. Like when I'm looking for birthday party ideas for the kids, it's a help because I can't. I don't know. I'm not creative in that sense. But when it comes to your job and things like that, I think it is better to free flow thinking rather than going and looking for the answer. We're so used to that instant gratification when it comes to search engines and things like that. And sometimes it's better to work for it and think for it and take the time. And it's kind of like setting yourself, I don't want to say setting yourself to fail, but allowing the failure and allowing yourself not to figure it out and then maybe coming to it later.
Yeah, and a term to replace failure might be experiment.
Yeah.
We are out of time, so I'm going to ask you each to close with one sentence you would like to just have people take away or summarize your experience today. Or one word or phrase.
I said it before to start, and I'll say it again. At some point, we were all one of those punk kids.
I really put him on the spot.
Yeah, this wasn't in the email.
It wasn't in the email.
I'm going to say what I had on my graduation cap, and that's the obstacle is the path.
For those of you that maybe are on the Star is Born kick recently, there's a line in one of the songs that says, maybe it's time to let the old ways die. And I think that's important for both the young kids and the older generation.
I would say one thing to take away from today is just to find a happy balance between both generations or every generations, because we're all working together. We all have different thinking styles, working styles, and just being able to be mindful of those differences and being able to adjust at different times. That would be what I would say.
I would like to thank you for your genuineness, your transparency, and your willingness to be vulnerable up here. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much, Sani and panelists, for actually bringing to life a lot of what we've been hearing up on slides, bringing it to life. Thank you so much. Before I ask our last speaker to come up, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the planning committee who helped put together today's program. For those of you who are present, as well as our presenters, if you could just stand up really quickly just to be acknowledged for all the work that you did in pulling this together. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, to close out our program, I'd like to welcome Elmhurst Mayor Steve Morley to the front just to say a last few comments for us. Steve?
Thank you so much. I'm going to put my notes here. Wrote them on a pad of paper, everybody. Little known fact, if you're an elected official in town and you walk up to a podium with one of these, all the elected officials in town feel it necessary to text you while you're up here. So just a few quick things. I wanted to say thank you to everybody, and I lost my glasses, so I'm just, boy, I tell you what, if somebody would have asked me, what are you doing today? I was going to say, well, I'm going to go to this symposium. And they're going to say, what's it about? It's about making me feel 100 years old at the end of the day. No, honestly, it's my pleasure to be here. And I want to certainly thank the sponsors, and most importantly, the City of Elmhurst and Elmhurst College Commission. This is a group of folks that, it's a commission that we formed at the city with Elmhurst College only about 2 or 3 years ago. I have the opportunity, the great opportunity, to go out to lunch every once in a while with leadership at Elmhurst College. And for the third or fourth time, where we're kind of playing one-upsmanship and telling each other how great our city is or how great our college is, we kind of came to the conclusion we really should have a little better communication. We formed this Elmhurst College and City Commission, and it's only been about 2 years, and they really are, this brainstorm, what happened here, came out of that commission, not to mention a whole bunch of other stuff. Both Elmhurst College and the city do extensive strategic planning, and I think it's important for everybody to know what each other is doing. We're two world-class organizations who really operate independently. Imagine if we put our heads together, what we can achieve. So that's really the reason behind the Elmhurst College Commission. You know, we are so fortunate. I talk about, when I give speeches and people, you know, ask what's great about Elmhurst, I talk about all the gems, you know, the crown jewels in Elmhurst, and certainly one of them is Elmhurst College. You know, the reason, and one of these youngsters mentioned, in fact, a couple of them mentioned, you know, it's always the generation before you that tries to figure out what's going on with the next generation. I remember being in college over 30 years ago in a marketing class, and the marketing professor says, we're trying to figure out what you're doing. You want to know what the most burgeoning, what the most growing marketing segment that's happening right now, it's you guys, and we can't figure you guys out. And I remember sitting right in your shoes going, how dumb can this guy be? I know exactly what's happening. I could tell him everything he wants to know. And from his standpoint, you know, you guys kind of look like aliens. And I tell you what, you get married, you start a family, you put your nose down, you work for 30 years, and pretty soon you put your head up and you're a mayor, you're 50 years old, and you can't use Instagram no matter how many times your daughter tries to show you how to do it. So really the reason why we're always looking to the next generation is you are the future. It's not that we're conflicted or you're doing it wrong. We just can't figure it out. But you are the future. When I went to college, you want to know what cutting technology was? Cutting edge technology was an ATM machine. I remember going to college with a card in my wallet and the banker here telling me, no, you can get money when you go to school with this magic machine. And I remember thinking to myself, really? I don't think he knows what he's talking about, because there's not machines everywhere that spit out money. Think about in 30 years, put my nose down, put my head up, Apple and Microsoft, the internet, Instagram, you name it, all of this stuff is brand new, and that's really what we're all trying to figure out. I truly thank the Elmhurst City and College Commission for allowing me to wrap this up, and I appreciate everyone's participation, and I wish you all a good day. Thank you.
You can't think about Elmhurst College without thinking about the community it's a part of.
When we introduce the college to prospective students, one of the biggest selling points is our location in a beautiful, safe, welcoming community just minutes from Chicago.
We also share resources and opportunities.
Our goal here in the simulation lab is to prepare nurses to be able to go out into the community. The collaboration of building this Sim Center together has really shown our commitment to the community and the healthcare of the people living in this community.
The college and the partnership have a number of relationships regarding athletic facilities, and they've been in place since the mid-1990s. I have the opportunity to speak to a number of park district directors from neighboring communities, and one of the things that I always tell them, if you have a college in your community, make sure you're a partner with them and reach out and be in touch with them, because there are so many overlapping opportunities.
The fresh perspective that Young Minds brings, not only to the college, but really to the community. That's something that you can just feel when you're walking around the town, and that's the effect that Elmhurst College has on the community of Elmhurst.
Opportunities connect local business owners to the college with invaluable insights on their business.
It ended up being one of the case studies where we talk through our marketing plan as a new business in Elmhurst and showcasing coffee and community and what that looks like. And that was our first point of really interacting with the college, and it was just a great experience because essentially we got this focus group of people to help us start to define who we are in this community. Our relationship with Elmhurst College has been invaluable to where we're at.
As a result, everybody wins, especially our students.
As an intern for the Chamber of Commerce, I do a lot of getting things prepared for events.
We get to work with the young students. We get to mentor them to some extent. It gives the students an opportunity to learn more about Elmhurst. It gives them a chance to work and to earn some money.
The same people that I'm emailing and talking to on a daily basis are the same people that I'm seeing at the Elmhurst Chamber events, are the same people that support Elmhurst, that are Blue Jay backers, and those people I see them sitting at our basketball games, so it kind of comes full circle for me.
We'll always benefit from one another and strive to succeed together.
When I think about the future of the city of Elmhurst, I believe that Elmhurst College plays a critical role. Not only does it continue to be an attraction for people to come visit Elmhurst, but I can't underscore enough how much that creative thinking that comes out of a liberal arts college means to the city of Elmhurst. We have a world-class town and a world-class college, and if we put our heads together, things can only get better.
It's an exciting time in Elmhurst, and I can't wait to see what happens next.
I'm John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. For 100 years and counting, we've promoted an environment that creates success for local businesses and our community. Nearly 600 members strong, we are the voice of business in Elmhurst at all levels of government and a liaison to our residents, consumers, and tourists.
Since 1982.
1981.
1993.
1948. Since 1955.
1892.
1991.
Since 1986.
1871.
We're here to help our customers' lives go right. We put our customers and community first. And innovation in relocation for 2 generations.
Serving our community more than just great meals. We create innovation in glass and metals.
We permanently solve your IRS problems.
4 generations of family dedication, forever invested in you.
We keep families rolling safely down the road.
For generations, we've helped students reach their full potential.
4 generations of serving the best Bohemian cuisine.
Make that 5.
So make today the day that you become a valued addition to our award-winning chamber, whether as a new member or via reactivation. Contact our office by phone at 630-834-6060 or email info@elmhurstchamber.org to learn about what's in it for you. Be a part of our next 100 years.